193 ablution tanks have been constructed in different mosques in Lahore. The biggest one has been constructed in Data Darbar Mosque. I would invite any of you to go there and have a look. What happens is that the Parks and Horticulture Authority, the lorries, they come there, they fill their tanks with their water, and the entire, you see, this Iqbal Park, which was the Minto Park, is now being irrigated by the water which they take from the ablution tank of Data Darbar. 310 car washing cycling plants have been installed in the you must have seen the car washing, for the purpose of car washing, because the water was being wasted while the cars were being washed. The entire water was being wasted. Now they have car washing recycling plants, which means that the water is not being wasted and the same water is being recycled. Then the tube wells were being used to use the underground water. The channels from the canal were at least 24 channels. They are irrigation channels. They were all closed. We have had 17 out of those 24 irrigation channels of Lahore Branch Canal, which remained choked for the past 35 years. They are now being opened. The irrigation department has compelled to do that. And the tube wells in the Governor House, the HSN College, in the Lawrence Garden, they've all been shut down. Now the water from the canals are being used to irrigate their lands. This is also one of the most significant steps that have been taken. The housing societies were not paying any aquifer charges, and VASA was completely helpless in doing that. Through the intervention of the courts, the housing societies have been compelled to pay the aquifer charges, and VASA has been richer by about 2 billion rupees. And those housing societies will now be, in fact, there's another step. For the first time in Lahore, water meters will be installed throughout Lahore, because strangely, we don't have water meters. So for residential purposes, commercial purposes, housing societies, they don't pay anything for the use of water, which is, in my opinion, criminal under these circumstances. So water meters will be installed. The work will commence from December, and people will be compelled to pay for the water that they are using. Then there are steps taken for rainwater harvesting. Two projects have been steered. If you notice this monsoon, it was always the case in monsoons that around Lawrence and in this Mall Road, wherever it rained, there was a lot of water used to accumulate. We've had constructed a water tank, a huge water tank, under the Lawrence Garden, and this monsoon you must have noticed that there was no water accumulation, because all of that water goes and gets stored in those water tanks. They are taken out, and the entire Lawrence Garden is being irrigated by the water. At least 3 other water tanks are being constructed in and around Lahore. As a result of these steps which were taken by the court, a report was compiled about a year back by the Directorate of Hydrology, VASA. And in that report, it was a pleasantly surprising report for us. It was reported that the water level was lastly 50.150 meters in 2018. Since the initiation of these steps, the water till 2020 the level has not gone down, which means that there has been no further depletion of groundwater in Lahore. And, since 2020, the water table has significantly come up. So that is, I think, one of the significant achievements of this climate litigation that I'm just talking about. 27.125 cusics, which is amounting to 1.75 crore gallons of groundwater per day, is being saved because of these measures. Much more in cantonment as well. The second initiation was regarding environment and smog. You must have noticed last December, because of the measures put in by this court, we had at the end of December at least 2 weeks of sunshine in Lahore, which we never experienced. That was because of, not many people know, the steps taken by this court regarding smog. Previously, these brick kilns, they are scattered all over Punjab. They were being operated on the old technology. Because of the orders of this court, all of them had converted to zigzag technology. You must now, traveling on these roads, motorways, you must have noticed white smoke coming out of these brick kilns. That is because of the new technology now that has been installed, because of the orders and directions of this court. This was a concerted effort over a period of 2.5 years. Many other steps are taken. I hold a weekly meeting on Fridays, and directions are issued regularly on many subjects which I cannot encompass in this short time that I have. But stubble burning is also one of the key elements which contributes to smog in Pakistan. It is a recent phenomena. It has been exacerbated by the other climate elements brought forth by the climate change. You know that stubble burning takes place during this season throughout Punjab. The Chief Secretary has been asked to hold weekly meetings. The Deputy Commissioners have been sensitized. These stubble burnings are, we make use of the NASA satellite imageries as well as the imageries from other, and we have real-time, our commission has real-time knowledge of where the stubble burning is taking place so that we can take action. And you will notice a significant reduction in the smog because the stubble burning has been controlled. Anyone indulging in stubble burning is now being imposed with a fine of 200,000 rupees. Another significant step, and people living in Lahore must have noticed that there is significant reduction in the use of plastic bags. That was also one of the directions issued by this court. At least the large stores and many stores, pharmaceuticals and others, they have disused plastic bags. And you would notice other bags which are more environmentally friendly, paper bags. This was also one of the directions issued by this court, and we are expanding it to the other districts of Punjab. I would, lastly, wrapping, as I said, there's so much other things that are happening, and this, I say, is the small little contribution that I'm trying to make to bring about, meaningful changes. We all can, wherever we are, people can make that change. But I would lastly refer to 2 steps further that we've taken. Heat. To control heat, we've asked LDA to impose restrictions. They have compiled regulations as well. Rooftop gardening and solar paneling, that is what is being done throughout Lahore, which will control significantly the heat, because heat now is one of the major factors which will have an impact on cities because of the urbanization and the infrastructure development that we have. Lastly, I'll refer to the Ruda case. It's famously called the Ruda case. There's an urban development that the government wants to set up at the bed where Ravi no more flows. And in that judgment, I've held 2 things, amongst others. One, that our national security now is nothing else but food security. So food security is the new name of national security. So please stop acquiring agricultural land. So I have also in that judgment struck down the old colonial law of acquisition, where there was, the acquisition of agricultural land was rampant for, setting up infrastructure projects and housing societies. And I have held in that judgment that we cannot acquire agricultural land, and I've struck down the relevant provisions. That judgment is before the Supreme Court now. Let's hope the Supreme Court, agrees with that judgment for the sake of the future of this country and our people, because we need to stop acquiring agricultural land and setting up all those housing societies. Lastly, I would like to introduce the members of the Commission, Hina, Hafizullah and Kamal, who are sitting there. They are at the vanguard of this campaign, and they are members of the Commission. And I tell you, they have faced life threats because of the actions that they have taken on the direction of this court. They are doing great work, and I give them a hand up. Big hand, please. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Justice Shahid Kareem. That was so inspiring. I'm a journalist, and I had no idea all these interventions are taking place in Lahore. I mean, this is the kind of story the media should be covering, really, and I think if you could join, okay, good, you joined the panel. So let's move on. My first question is to Khabar Mumtaz, the former Vice President of the IUCN. What lessons did we learn from the super floods of 2010? Because remember, we had massive flooding in the country about 12 years ago in 2010. And who gets left behind by these natural catastrophes despite getting impacted the most adversely? आपका ऑन कर दीजिए. Can't hear you. इनका ले.
बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया रायना, और बहुत मैं शुक्रगुजार हूँ इस वक्त इस फोरम की कि उन्होंने एनवायरनमेंट को और क्लाइमेट चेंज को नेशनल डिस्कोर्स का हिस्सा बनाया है, और मेरा अपना ख्याल है कि ये एक बहुत बड़ा ह्यूमन राइट्स इशू है जिसको कि अब उसकी सही जगह मिलनी चाहिए. So before I start, I would like to pay tribute to Asma, a fellow traveler, a champion of human rights, women's rights, a very close friend, who fearless, courageous, and who upheld her principles under all conditions. And I also would like to thank the organizers for this panel and for inviting me. We've heard enough of and a lot of information exists about the scale of this havoc. And there was a precursor in 2010 and 11. 2010 का जो था, it was a riverine flood, but 2011 का जो सिंध में flood था, वो बारिशों की ही वजह से था. उसमें हमने बहुत सारी चीज़ें देखी जो कि हमें जो कि फॉल्ट लाइंस आइडेंटिफाई की थी, जो कि हमें तैयारियों के लिए ज़रूरी है. दो चीज़ें जो उसमें थी और जो कि हम इस फ्लड में भी हमारे सामने आई हैं, वो यही हैं कि कुछ लोग ऐसे होते हैं जो कि रह जाते हैं जब फ्लड की रिलीफ होती है या रिहैबिलिटेशन होती है. So I think what we've learned, and I think again we've seen in this flood also, that there are those who are left behind. And we find that those are the people, the ones who are left behind are the ones who are vulnerable already. They have pre-existing vulnerabilities which get heightened and exacerbated during such catastrophes. We've seen, for instance, in the areas which have been affected by flood, the 16% of the population was already food insecure. And we also saw that 10% of the households from the previous flood of 2011 have not come out of absolute poverty. They did not succeed in coming out of absolute poverty. So unless we look at ameliorating the pre-existing conditions, we will continue to have people who are devastated by these floods, by these calamities. We already know that 33 million people are displaced, but within these left out people on the margins, the Haris, the landless, the daily wagers, the women who are left behind are the ones that really get no attention. And in this particular flood of 2022, 57% of the fatalities were of women and children. 57% were of the children, and then we find that there are, the most vulnerable are pregnant women, which also reflects upon the lack of family planning, population welfare facilities to women, because most of these are undernourished or malnourished and bad health. So these women, of these 650,000 pregnant women, 130,000 are at risk. That is, they are due to deliver within the next 3 months. There is no antenatal facility. They will probably be delivering at home. Their homes are gone, and we don't see any, apparently now some attention is being given to it, but when we are looking at a flood or a devastation, I think we also have to look at what preparations we have done. And I think from the flood of 2010 and 11 to the floods of 2022, we find that preparedness was missing, has been missing. When we are talking about being prepared, there has to be an early warning system, and I'm not sure what early warning system exists in place. There have to be safe places for evacuation with backup of health and food, minimum food supplies. We don't see any signs of it. And while relief there's been response to the relief, we find the agencies responsible for responding mobilized with delay. It was the NGOs, the non-profit organizations who were linked to the grassroots, who came out first to come forward for relief, and उनके दायराकार बहुत लिमिटेड होते हैं. हर जो नॉन प्रॉफिट है उसका अपना दायराकार है, वो उस तक, और वहाँ पर लोग मुनज़्ज़म भी हैं, और जब तक लोग मुनज़्ज़म लोकल लेवल पे नहीं होते हैं तो आपकी रिलीफ जो है उन लोगों तक नहीं पहुँचती जिनको की ज़रूरत है. तो we find that again and again it's the not-for-profit, the NGOs who took the lead. The government has followed later. Army was called in and deployed as much as they could. All the helicopters were deployed, boats were deployed, but the ones who were left out somehow do remain left out. And I think there is no policy to look at that. When I was at the National Commission on the Status of Women, I carried out a gender analysis of existing sectoral national policies. The National Climate Change Policy recognizes that the impact of calamities, of environmental change can be very high on the marginal people, especially women. It also identified those groups, but we find that there is no action plan. The action plan is missing. And then the National Disaster Reconstruction Plan of 2019 does not include the gender perspective, the women's and the children's perspective at all. ये 2019 का है जब तक के हमारी कई calamities हो चुकी थी, उसमें हमें ये भी पता चल गया था, we all know that we are not responsible for climate change, but we are impacted by it. But then how prepared are we for that? And I think that's where the missing link is. We've got institutions, we've got NDMA, we've got provincial district management authority. Yesterday we were told there is another fund that is for risk management, but we don't find their presence and response and action plans. Their budgets are very limited, resource allocation is not available. So I think इस वक्त जो लम्हा प्रक्रिया है हमारे पास ये है कि institutions पे institutions बना दें, लेकिन लोगों की जो ज़रूरत है उस वक्त की वो पूरी नहीं होती. And I would like to end, because I think we only have 10 minutes, what I would like to end with or close with is that we need to recognize, and again it's been proven that the not-for-profits, the NGOs are the ones who reach out, but the current atmosphere environment for NGOs is very tight. उनके लिए स्पेस ही नहीं है काम करने की, उनको एक शक की नज़र से देखा जाता है, उनके काम को भी शक की नज़र से देखा जाता है, जबकि again and again we find that they deliver and they need to be included in the planning that is to be done for preparing for the next calamity. We are going to have more and more calamities until the global climate change process is not, is not stopped or at least brought to some sort of a rational level. And in that I feel that their inputs need to be included. अगर कोई गलत काम कर रहा है तो हमारे यहाँ कानून बहुत है उनको रोकने के लिए, लेकिन जो अच्छा काम कर रहा है उनको हम कैसे शामिल करें, that should be our objective. And lastly I would say something that the Justice Saab has said जो कि दिल को लगी थी, and this is one of the things that I've been campaigning for, is that food security is our highest priority. Women's role in that food security is something that is totally ignored. And how do we, for a long term, unless we create that equality between our citizens, the dignity and respect that women need, their capacity building to deal with disasters, all that is not part of any of the policies that we have discussed. And we analyzed 6 policies, except for the health policy, and that includes women, but it's not integrated with the other policies. So, as somebody yesterday said, we need integrated policies, and we need local government. Local government is your first port of responding, and we are devoid of those. So these are some of the issues that one needs to address if we want to be ready for the climate change impact, which is going to increase. It's not going to reduce.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Can you hear me? My next question is to Baba Jan, the civil rights and climate activist from Gilgit-Baltistan. Baba Jan, आपने podium में आना है. You're most welcome because there थोड़े mics में issues है. According to the Ministry of Climate Change, Pakistan faced 17 glacier lake outburst floods this summer in comparison to the 5 or 6 floods that occurred last year. How are vulnerable mountain communities coping with climate change? What support do they need?
मेरे स्टेज पे बैठे अकाबरीन और हाल में मौजूद तमाम दियार गैर के मेहमानान और मेरे मुल्क के अजीम, इस मुल्क के तकदीर बदलने के लिए यहाँ जमा हुए सामाईन, आप सबको मेरा सुरुख सलाम। मैं एक ऐसे जगह से यहाँ पे आया हूँ जहाँ की मुस्तकबिल बरसगीर के 2 अरब इंसानों की मुस्तकबिल के साथ, इनकी जिंदगियों के साथ वाबस्ता है, और लाताइदाद जंगली हयात, लाताइदाद जानवर और लाताइदाद नायाब परिंदों के जिंदगी का अनहसार गिलगित बल्तिस्तान और कश्मीर के पहाड़ों से है, वहां से निकलने के पानी से है। अगर गिलगित बल्तिस्तान के साथ आज हम मिलके नहीं सोचेंगे तो ये पूरा खित्ता बंजर होगा, गिलगित के बल्तिस्तान के पहाड़ सूख जाएंगे। उसके ऊपर ये प्रोग्राम रखने पे मैं अजीम हमारी मजलूमों की माँ इनकलाबी आसमा जहांगीर साहिबा फाउंडेशन, पाकिस्तान बार काउंसिल, सुप्रीम कोर्ट बार एसोसिएशन और आसमा जहांगीर लीगल हायर टीम को भी सलाम पेश करता हूं। यहाँ पे हमें सोचने की जरूरत यह है कि जिस अंदाज से गिलगित बल्तिस्तान के अंदर तरक्की के नाम पे गैर मुकामी सरमायादारों को मादनियात के लीजेस दिए जाते हैं, उनका मकसद यहाँ के सरमायादार का मकसद वहाँ के सकाफत के साथ, وہاں کے مذہب کے ساتھ، وہاں کے طور طریقے کے ساتھ، وہاں کے آب و ہوا کے ساتھ، وہاں کے انسانوں کے ساتھ، وہاں کے جنگلی حیات کے ساتھ کوئی تعلق نہیں ہے. ان کا محض ایک ہی منصوبہ ہے، وہ اس پورے دنیا کو ملیامیٹ کر کے علاقے کو جہنم بنا کر اپنے لیے سرمایہ کمایا جا سکے. اس پہ اوپر ہمیں غور کرنے کی ضرورت ہے. جب اتنا سارا معاملہ وہاں پہ ہو رہا ہے، وہاں پہاڑ کے پہاڑ سرک رہے ہیں، کہیں پہ برف بٹ رہا ہے، کہیں پہ برف کے جھیلیں بن رہی ہیں، اور ان کے نتائج میں زمین دوز زلزلے آ رہے ہیں. یہاں سڑکوں کی تعمیر میں بے پناہ بارود کے استعمال سے پورے پہاڑ ہل جاتے ہیں اور اس وجہ سے بھی تباہیاں آ رہی ہیں. لیکن سڑکوں کو بنانے سے پہلے بدقسمتی سے وہاں پہ جو بننے والی جھیلوں کو برباد کرنے والوں کے ساتھ کیا ہو رہا ہے، اس پہ سوچنے کا مقام ہے. اس پہ پاکستان کا وکلا، پاکستان کا صحافی، پاکستان کا استاد، ہر طبقۂ فکر، طالب علم، حتیٰ کہ ہندوستان کا بھی تمام طبقے کے اوپر فرض بنتا ہے کہ اس پہ سوچا جائے. یہ دونوں ملکوں کا سیراب کرنے کا سب سے بڑی جو شاہراہی رگ یہی ہے، گلگت بلتستان ہے. اس پہ سوچنے کے بجائے وہاں پہ ہم جب متاثرین کی بحالی کی بات کرتے ہیں، ہم ماحولیات کی بات کرتے ہیں، ہمارے اوپر انسداد دہشت گردی ایکٹ لگا کر پتہ نہیں کتنے کتنے سالوں کے لیے جیلوں میں ڈالا جاتا ہے. وہاں پہ سانس لینے پہ پابندی ہے. وہاں کئی سالوں سے ان معاملات کو دیکھنے کے لیے بلدیاتی انتخابات، لوکل لوگوں کو مضبوط کرنے کے بجائے ججز بھی ایک قلم کے وزیر اعظم کے، آپ کے اسلام آباد کے اور آپ کے یہاں کے ریاستی اداروں کے سفارش پر ججز بھرتی ہوتے ہیں، اس مسجد سے ایک، اس مسجد سے ایک. وہاں انسانوں کا کوئی شمار نہیں ہے. اس سب کے اوپر دیکھنے کی ضرورت ہے. جب ہمارے لوگ سپریم کورٹ جاتے ہیں، آپ کے سپریم کورٹ کہتا ہے گلگت بلتستان پاکستان کا حصہ نہیں ہے. ٹھیک ہے جناب، تو پھر آپ کا ایف سی نے، آپ کا چیف سیکرٹری، آپ کا اے جی پی آر، آپ کے تمام K2 آپ کا، اور وہاں کے لوگ آپ کے نہیں ہیں. وہاں کے لوگوں کا کے اوپر سوچنے کا یہاں پہ پابندی ہے، بولنے کا پابندی ہے. تو کیا کیا جائے؟ اب ہم اس نقطے سے ایک بہت بڑی تحریک تعمیر کر سکتے ہیں انسانوں کے. مثال کے طور پر 2 ممالک کی ایٹمی افواج ہمارے سیاچن پہ، ہمارے K2 پہ، ہمارے بلترو پہ، ہمارے بٹروں پہ، یہاں اتنے دونوں ممالک کے افواج بیٹھے ہوئے ہیں جدید اسلحے کے ساتھ. اس سے بھی ہمارے ماحول اور ہمارے آنے والے نسلوں کا خطرہ ہو سکتا ہے. اس کے لیے ہم اس ماحولیاتی ایشو کو لے کے دونوں ملکوں پر پریشر بڑھا سکتے ہیں. وہاں سے فورسز واپس لائے اور وہ امن کا گہوارہ ہو، وہاں سیاحوں کے لیے کھول دیا جائے، نہ کہ وہاں جنگی ساز و سامان سے وہاں جنگلی حیات بھی نقصان میں، انسان بھی نقصان میں، اور ہمارے آنے والے نسل بھی نقصان میں. معزز سامعین، گلگت بلتستان کے اندر پورے ملک سمیت کئی ممالک کو ماحول دوست بجلی پیدا کرنے کے لیے قدرتی آپ کا نیچرل سلوپ کے ساتھ ساتھ پانی موجود ہے. پانی سے ماحول دوست بجلی بنا سکتے ہیں. لیکن وہاں پانی سے بجلی بنانے کے بجائے سعودی عرب سے تیل لاتے ہیں کمیشن کے خاطر. وہاں کا چپراسی سے لے کے آپ کا صدر تک کمیشن خور ہے. ہمارے والے بھی وہاں کے تیل لا کے وہاں بجلی پیدا کر رہے تاکہ ہمارے برف کے پہاڑ، ہمارا ماحول کو آلودہ کیا جائے. ان کا کمیشن سے غرض سے 1,00,000 میگا واٹ بجلی وہاں پیدا ہو سکتی ہے. بجلی پیدا نہیں کرتے، سستی بجلی، ماحول دوست بجلی. ان کا کمیشن سے غرض سے ان کو کیسے روکا جائے. یہ ان کی لڑائیاں بھی کوئی حقیقی لڑائیاں نہیں ہیں. یہ سارے بڑے بوٹ والوں کے دونوں طرف سے پالیسی ہیں، اور کچھ نہیں بتاؤں گا. ان کو ماحول سے غرض نہیں ہے، انسانوں سے غرض نہیں ہے، کمیشن سے غرض ہے۔ اس میں گلگت بلتستان کے اندر جو چلنے والی گاڑیاں ہیں، ان کو جو پرانی گاڑیاں ہیں، دودار گاڑیاں ہیں، مال بردار، ان کو سڑکوں سے واپس کرنے کی ضرورت ہے، اور یہاں سے جو گاڑیاں آتی ہیں، چاہے مال بردار ہو چاہے نجی گاڑیاں ہو، اور وہاں پہ جو تھرمل کے جنریٹرز ہیں ان پہ پابندی کی ضرورت ہے، اور غیر مقامی تمام لیزز کو منسوخ کرنے کی ضرورت ہے۔ اس پہ ہم گزارش کریں گے آپ سب سے، ہمارے صحافی حضرات یہاں بیٹھے ہیں، آپ گلگت بلتستان کو بھی نظر انداز نہ کریں، آپ دیکھیں، آپ دیکھتے رہے، لیکن تھوڑا زیادہ دیکھنے کی ضرورت ہے۔ گلگت بلتستان آپ کی بقا ہے، 2 ارب انسانوں کی بقا ہے، جانوروں کی، جنگلی حیات کی اور پرندوں کے علاوہ۔ اب صورتحال یہ ہے کہ وہاں پہ کل رات کو 2 بجے ایک پورا منظر نہ تھا 4 دنوں سے عوامی ایکشن کمیٹی کا، 2 بجے آ کے اٹھا کے لے گئے ہیں ان کو۔ یہ ہے آپ کے پرانے پاکستان اور نئے پاکستان اور مشرف نواز سرکار جو بھی ہے، فوج کے، ان سب کا ایک رویہ ہے۔ تو وہاں پہ گلگت بلتستان کے اندر، گلگت بلتستان کے جنگلات کے کٹاؤ روکنے کے لیے کیا کیا جائے؟ ایک ان کمیشن خوروں پہ نظر رکھنے کی ضرورت ہے۔ کسی دن گلگت سے، آپ پنجاب سے، یہ حامد میر صاحب آپ سے گزارش کریں گے، ایک کیمرہ مین کو بھیج دیجئے گا کتنا جنگل کاٹ کر لکڑی کے لاٹھ لگے ہوئے ہیں۔ حکومتیں بدلتے ہی پرمٹ نکالتے ہیں، جنگل کاٹ کے رکھتے ہیں۔ سڑک کے آس پاس میں، دور کا نہیں کہوں گا آپ کو، دیکھیں کتنی تباہی ہے۔ تو گلگت بلتستان کے اندر جنگل کو روکنے کے لیے، مزید جنگل بڑھا کر وہاں کے پہاڑوں کو بچانے کے لیے کیا کیا جائے؟ وہاں کے مفلوک الحال مظلوم انسانوں کو، جو کسی آئین کے بغیر چلتے ہیں، کسی قانون کے بغیر چلتے ہیں، ایک بادشاہ اسلام آباد سے حکم نامے بیچتا ہے، میری یہ مرضی آئی، سونے سے پہلے گلگت کے بارے میں یہ جاگ کر اس طرح ایک اور اس کی مرضی بدلتی ہے۔ یعنی حکم ناموں کے آرڈر کے ذریعے چلائے جانے والے علاقے کے لوگوں کو سبسڈائز گیس فراہم کی جائے تاکہ وہاں جنگل کی ڈیفارسٹیشن جو ہے ختم ہو سکے۔ اور ساتھ ساتھ ہم آپ سے مطالبہ کریں گے، وہاں جو انسانی حقوق کے لیے کام کرنے والے لوگ ہیں، جو سول سوسائٹی ہیں، ان کی تحریکوں پر قدغن ہیں، ان کو آپ اپنا سمجھ کر، جس طرح کیٹو کو اپنا سمجھتے ہیں، وہاں کے رہنے والے انسانوں کو اپنا سمجھ کر آپ ان مسائل کو لے کے آگے چلیں۔ ایسا نہ کرنے کی صورت میں یہ ہوگا کہ انسانیت بھی خطرے میں آئے گی، پھر یہ یہاں کی لڑائیاں بھی وہاں آئیں گی۔ لوگ بہت برداشت لوگوں نے کیا ہوا ہے، وہ برداشت کا مادہ نوجوانوں میں سے ختم ہوتا جا رہا ہے، فریاد کا مادہ ختم ہوتا ہوئے جا رہا ہے۔ تو یہ اس کے ذمہ دار بھی اسلام آباد کے حکمران ہیں۔ ہم وہاں پہ کچھ جگہوں میں، بلتستان میں اور ہنزہ میں ششپل گلیشیر بنا ہے، بلتستان کے رندو کے علاقے میں زیر زمین زلزلے کے جھٹکے آئے ہیں، عطاباد جھیل میں بنا ہے، اور نگر میں اور دیامر میں اور مختلف جگہوں میں جو جتنے پہاڑ ہیں وہ پھٹ رہے ہیں۔ اس کے لیے بین الاقوامی طور پہ جو ماہرین ہیں ان کو لانے کے لیے کیا کیا جائے، اور لانے کے لیے کوئی ماہر لاتا ہے تو یہاں سے آپ کا کوئی حوالدار اس کے کان میں پکڑ کر واپس بھیجتا ہے۔ یہ مسائل ہیں، اس کو دیکھنے کی ضرورت ہے۔ وہ آئیں، وہ پھر سفارشات تیار کرے بین الاقوامی ماہرین، وہ سفارشات کے نتیجے میں انتظامیہ عمل درآمد کرے، اور انتظامیہ مقامی لوگوں کے ہاتھ میں ہو، مقامی حکومتیں ہوں، ضلعی حکومتیں ہوں، وہ عوام کا بہترین، اب تاریخی طور پہ بھی آپ کے تمام طریقے سے وہ دیکھ سکتے ہیں ماحول کو بچانے کے لیے۔ ایک چھوٹا مثال دے کے میں اپنی بات کو اختتام کروں گا۔ اس سال 30 جون سے 9 جولائی تک ہمارے گاؤں میں ایک دھرنا تھا، وہاں کوئی غیر مقامی سرمایہ دار کو پورا پہاڑ دیا گیا ہے لیز پہ، اس کو عوام نے نہیں چھوڑا ہے، سی پیک کے اوپر دھرنا تھا۔ وہاں ایک خاتون، اس کا نام ہے بی بی، وہ کھڑی ہو کے آئی، بوڑھی خاتون تھی۔ اس نے کہا، میں جب چھوٹی تھی تو میں نے بکریاں بھیڑ چرانے گئی تھی، وہاں سے اپنے ساتھ चंद जाड़ियों के पुशूल नाम की एक जाड़ी है, उसके चंद शाखें तोड़ के लाई थी, हरी शाखें। तो मेरे घर पे शाम को छापा लगा। उस वक्त के गांव का माहिदीन ने, बड़ू ने छापा लगाया, छापा लगा के मेरे बाप से एक बेड़ू छीन के ले गया। जब मेरे 4 छोटी सी टहनियों पे, पुशूल के हरी टहनियों पे इतना मेरे साथ उस वक्त हुआ, तो 8000 कनाल पहाड़ किसने दिया है? देने वाले का और लेने वाले का सर कलम करो कह के एक बूढ़ी खातून ने यह पैगाम दिया। उस वक्त हमारे ये तरीक़ेकार थे, कोई मारखोर नहीं मार सकता था। कोई ये जुनिपर के दरख्त थे, उनको हरे किसी दरख्त को नहीं काट सकते थे, सख्त पाबंदियां थी। यानी इंसान के कत्ल के बराबर उसको सजा दी जाती थी, उसकी जमीन उठाई जाती थी। लेकिन ये किराए और कमीशन के एजेंट जो 70 साल से वहां पे गासिबाना बैठे हुए हैं, ये हमारे दरख्त भी काटते हैं, हमारे दरिया भी बेचने लगे हैं सरमाएदारों को, और वो ताकि किराए के बिजली, उनसे बिजली घरों से बिजली उठाई जा सके, हमारा हर चीज बेचने पे लगे हैं। लेकिन अच्छी बात है, गिलगित बल्तिस्तान का पढ़ा लिखा नौजवान तुलबा तालिबात आगे आ रही है और लड़ रही हैं, ये खुशाइंद है। तो हमें इस माहौल को बचाने के लिए, इस वतन के मुस्तकबिल के लिए गिलगित बल्तिस्तान को, कश्मीर के पहाड़ों को देखने की जरूरत है। यहाँ दोनों ममालिक से डिमांड करने की जरूरत है, फिलफौर अपनी अफवाज को वापस लें। वसलाम, बहुत शुक्रिया।
Thank you so much, Babajan, for your inspiring and illuminating speech. Next question is to Naz Baloch, the Parliamentary Secretary for Climate Change. What has been the government's response to the floods? अगर आपने podium पे आना है तो बेशक आप आ जाएं। माइक आपका अगर नहीं सही, उधर echo आता है थोड़ा सा, तो so let's hear the government's response to the floods. And also if you can talk about our national climate change policy that was formulated in 2012 and about the Climate Change Act 2017.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. First of all, I want to thank for having this great opportunity to be here at the Asma Jahangir annual conference and speaking on a subject like climate change, which is the most important subject not only in Pakistan but in the world. But before I start speaking on climate change, I would just like to say a few words remembering Asma Jahangir and her efforts and her struggle for true democracy in Pakistan and for being the voice to the voiceless people. A very strong and a very courageous, a very brave lady who knew whatever she did was for the innocent people, for the deprived people, and made sure that she raises the voice and turns to be the voice of the voiceless people. I think we can speak volumes on her struggle and her efforts and whatever she did to be known and renowned personality of Pakistan, which we always are going to miss. She was not only a legal person, a legal champion, but she was a great human rights activist. Well, speaking on climate change, as everyone knows, the recent flooding in Pakistan has washed away villages, leaving millions of people homeless. Kids are out of school, and millions of people are facing serious health concerns. There is a huge and a very sharp increase in the waterborne diseases. I particularly coming from the south of Pakistan, which has been unfortunately the most seriously affected areas. And also, when I speak of it, I want to let everyone know the devastation that has been caused in the northern part of Pakistan, that's the KPK. Also, Balochistan, one of the most affected provinces. As we all know that Pakistan is a home to more than 7,000 glaciers. It's a huge number. But when we know and we realize that a scorching temperature of 52 degrees Celsius is nothing but a destruction and devastation at such a point of time, and knowing our geographical location. Pakistan cannot come out of all this situation all by itself because we lack resources. And above all, we are the sufferers. We are not the creators of this situation. We are not the factors who have contributed to the climate change. In fact, we are the ones who are striving hard for climate action. But yes, we seek support from all the countries who've seen a sharp boom in industrialization. And we've been discussing this on all forums. Talking on climate change, I can speak a lot, but the circumstances that Pakistan is facing are very serious. The challenges in the wake of climate change, despite the fact that Pakistan is a low contributor of the problem, that means only we are emitting less than 1%, that is 0.8% contribution of global greenhouse gases emissions as per GHS Inventory 2018. Pakistan continues to suffer as one of the most impacted countries. In 2021, Pakistan was categorized as one of the 3 countries that have continuously remained in the top 10 list of most impacted countries over the past decade. Pakistan has also been ranked as the 8th most vulnerable country to climate change, according to Global Climate Risk Index 2021, report by German Watch that I'm discussing and highlighting. In terms of climate-related challenges, including water stress, glacier melting, extreme events, and spread of diseases, Pakistan has been the epicenter of cascading climate disasters during 2022. As I mentioned earlier, the glacier lake outburst floods is one of the serious concerns that we are focusing and trying to address. Forest fires, torrential monsoon rainfalls that have triggered the unprecedented floodings in my country. The recent floods have severely compounded the economic challenges of Pakistan. As we all know that we are already facing a huge economic crisis. And on top of that, a country which is already striving hard to make both ends meet, and we are facing this kind of disaster. The loss incurred has been estimated of around $40 billion. We are definitely looking forward towards the COP27 conference that's coming in Egypt, and we'll make sure that Pakistan does not only discusses and makes strong dialogues, but also makes a better smooth working relation with the countries who need to contribute and actually do more to save this globe, to save our planet, and to save our motherland. Pakistan has made immense efforts in policy making. Yes, we need to have better policies. Yes, we need to do more, implement more and more. But still, whatever Pakistan has done has to be appreciated. We formulated a national climate change policy 2021, which is focusing on various sectors to reduce the climate impacts. The submission of Pakistan National Determined Contributions, which has been revised in 2021 under the Paris Agreement. National Electric Vehicle Policy 2019 for paving shifts towards electric automobiles. The Hazardous Waste Management Policy 2022 for efficient disposal of solid waste. Now, these are the most important things that Pakistan, we feel we need to focus on and we are working on. The 10 billion tree tsunami project, almost 1.8 billion plants planted so far. Protected Area Initiative to conserve ecologically important areas. Then comes the Ecosystem Restoration Initiative. facilitating transition towards environmentally resilient Pakistan and attaining land degradation neutrality. Recharge Pakistan is another program for climate resilience and water security through cost-effective ecosystem-based adaptation. The glacial outburst flood, which we call GLOF, for continuation of GLOF 1 and to mitigate GLOF-related risks. As I discussed, that we are a home to more than 7,000 glaciers. Therefore, this flood has it's created havoc. When I speak of it, there are places which were so shocking to see through the satellite images. Almost 100 kilometers of new lakes that this flood created. It's something beyond imagination. That means it's changing the shape of the earth, and in a negative manner. Glacial lake outburst that I discussed is definitely one of the most important subjects that we are working on. Pakistan Clean Air Program, again, mitigating the air pollution. Climate resilient agriculture, US $35 million GCF grant was signed with FAO for Punjab and the province of Sindh. Banning the plastics, capacity building on water quality, as I discussed and mentioned, the waterborne diseases, national adaptation plan, gendered and climate mainstreaming, one of the most important subjects which is usually ignored, but this government is specifically working hard on it because we know that our women are the ones who are suffering the most. Climate resilient urban human settlements and living Indus initiative. There is so much that, of course, I wanted to share, but I'm sure, as I'm short of time, all that I can say that it's a time that the world is moving on and focusing on food insecurity. It's an unnatural phenomena, and it's a natural phenomena too. We need to combat together, join hands together, but the government of Pakistan is focused to help protect the environment because we know we cannot change nature and already we are too late. I think the world is too late because when we were speaking of climate change as the most geographically being on the most difficult situation, I think maybe this was not the priority of the rest of the world and especially the West when we speak of. But today, when Pakistan has witnessed the worst flood in the human history, I think it's high time the world needs to collaborate and join hands to protect the motherland. Thank you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I think we're running a bit out of time, so can I request Ali, Taqir, and Rafe, and Abrar, Sasha, to just keep their presentations to 5 minutes, not more. So my next question is to Ali Taqir Sheikh, who's a well-known climate change and water resources expert. Aapne upar podium par aana hai. What are the official approaches to addressing disasters in Pakistan, and can you identify the policy gaps, both at the local level and at the international level?
Thank you, Ms. Chair. I'm sure Asma Jahangir is listening to this conversation from up in the skies, from the heavens. And I want to thank her not only for what she did when she was alive, but also for triggering a process that has at least enabled me today to speak to so many young aspirant members of the legal fraternity to talk about climate justice in the context of questions that the chair has asked me to raise. So it's a unique opportunity for me. Your question is that what are the gaps in policy? I wish to submit the policies should never be seen in isolation. Policies need to be reviewed or looked at in the context of the institutional capacity. An A-class document that does not have A-class institutions to support will have several challenges. Second point in this regard, policies sometimes lack priorities. When you have urgencies of the kind that we are facing, question is, what are or ought to be our urgencies? And I wish to submit three. I don't know if they are covered in the policies that the people have referred to. First, that climate vulnerability is first and foremost a local vulnerability. Its solutions lie in local action. I think Baba Jan highlighted that very eloquently, that how local knowledge and wisdom can guide. And local action can be facilitated only by local governments, not simply by procedures for or rules for local governance, local government. Unfortunately, People's Party, Pakistan Muslim League, PTI, all leading parties in the countries have been reluctant to introduce and initiate the third tier of our governance. And that is people's right that has been denied. And unless local government is there, municipal services cannot be delivered. And municipal services, a new name for them, are the environmental services. That is sewerage, that's drinking water, that's passage for storm water, and things of this sort. That's protection of communal lands, jinko hum shamlat kehte hain. And that is the function of local government. And that is the first step to resilience. Imagine for a moment when you don't have that, you will have only the military to come, which will have better discipline, better equipment, and stocks to undertake relief services. When you do that, that means that the civilian apparatus has collapsed or does not exist to begin with and cannot deliver and take charge of their lives and livelihoods. So my first submission is that in terms of gaps and priorities, where is the local government? Where is the local action? Where are the local adaptation plans of action? Unless we have local adaptation plans, we will be undertaking a very expensive path of development that can be wasteful, that can be slower, that can be riddled with corruption and elite capture. My second point that I wanted to make, that like human beings and other species, water bodies also have right to life. Be these rivers, be these lakes, these groundwater. Now, if we violate their right, we are encroaching our river banks, we are building human settlements on their way, we are inviting trouble. We can never succeed, we can never conquer water. Most of the damages that have happened in this country because of floods, 2010 was mentioned, I guess, and these ones also, are because that we interfered in the passage of the water. We did not respect its right to flow. And there are many reasons, you know. One particular reason is land use and land use planning laws either do not exist, or they are very weak, or they are not adhered to or complied with. And violation oftentimes happens because of absence of local government. Because then the functionaries can issue permits and licenses. And that is why the housing societies, yesterday I think I heard the chronic issue of plots. A lot of areas that was communal land and forest and state forest and shamlats then goes to elite housing societies. And now, as we see on TV screens, they're moving to the next band. It's not only Lahore, Karachi and big cities, it are the smaller towns that are dotting in the city. And that's very closely linked, as Justice was saying in his keynote address, to the food security issues as well. So therefore, my second point, in order to conclude, is let's respect water and that can water bodies and their right to live. It's not always the legal issues. In some countries, they try to make it a legal right. There are challenges in its enforcement, particularly for weaker governance, but it's an ethical and human survival issue in many other sense. My third and last point, in terms of urgencies. Resilience is a function of resilient infrastructure. If the standards of our infrastructure were defined and introduced by the Britishers' Raj period, we are bound to err, bound to be vulnerable. Therefore, my submission is that we need to have augmented, strengthened, improved construction standards, materials, building codes, and zoning laws. अगर बलूचिस्तान में लोगों के कच्चे घर गिरे हैं तो गिरने चाहिए थे. It doesn't surprise me. Why it will surprise anybody? If more than 70% of houses in Sindh have collapsed only because they were kacha houses, that is our fault. It is not their crime that they are poor. So this is because we have not invested enough thinking in our policies and in our budget allocations to ensure that our infrastructure is resilient. Our bridges, our roads, our other infrastructure, and particularly resilient housing is the most important one, because without shelter, human dignity is compromised. Imagine if we are living with our families and children on the roadside without any facilities. So I conclude that now we are talking what to do. Let's not invest in fragility. We are preparing ourselves for the next floods if we are asking people to reconstruct same houses at same locations with same materials at same flood-prone areas. And the governments and some very leading NGOs that are being promoted these days are all doing that, and that is not a good news for us. This is a road of maladaptation. The infrastructural investment that Pakistani state has done has reduced from 15 billion a year in PSDP to 5, and because of these disasters, this 500 billion, and because of these disasters, we don't even have 500 billion. But whatever loans or grants or international finance that we are seeking, donations and philanthropists we are reaching out to, I think we'll be failing them, we were cheating them, unless we address these three questions of local government, respecting the right of the passage of water bodies, and infrastructure that is climate resilient. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Without wasting any more time, Rafe Alam, please could you come to the podium? So let's shift the perspective to the international climate negotiations. So Rafe, you're going to be going to Egypt. This will be the 27th COP. That means 27 meetings have taken place. These are COP, Conference of Parties, signatory to the UNFCCC, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Rafe, why are these UN climate conferences delivering?
I'm not going to Raina. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I want to thank and congratulate the Asma Jahangir conference for hosting such a spectacular event, specifically Tahir Jahangir Saab, Munize and Sulema. Congratulations. Asma Jahangir was my introduction to law. In 94-95, I wasn't even a law student, and I interned with her. And as a mentor, she really guided me into the profession, and I'm incredibly proud to be here as a legacy of an unbelievably wonderful woman. I also want to appreciate the efforts of Mr. Justice Shahid Karim with the fantastic job with Haroon Farooq sir. We salute you. Dekhin ji, the Earth's atmosphere is in balance so that we as human civilization can live here. यहाँ पानी है, यहाँ हवा है, इसके बगैर यहाँ कुदरत जिंदगी नहीं मिलेगी आपको. And this is in a balance. You tip this balance and the very things that allow humanity to live here will go away. Climate change is caused by human beings. It's caused by greenhouse gases. जब आप कोई चीज़ ज़मीन से निकाल के उसको जलाते हैं, चाहे वो कोयला हो, दरख्त हो, तेल हो, पेट्रोल हो, गैस हो, उससे कहीं ना कहीं ग्रीन हाउस गैसेस पैदा होंगी. और उन ग्रीन हाउस गैसेस का what they do is they trap the sun's heat in the atmosphere. और आहिस्ता आहिस्ता नहीं, जल्द अज जल्द टेम्परेचर बढ़ना शुरू हो गया है। सनती इनकलाब के मुकाबले में आज 2022 में दुनिया ऑन एवरेज 1.1-1.2 डिग्री सेंटीग्रेड ज्यादा गर्म है, सिर्फ 1.1। मगर इस 1 डिग्री सेंटीग्रेड पे आप देखें पाकिस्तान में जिस तरह की फ्लडिंग हुई है इस साल, इस वक्त नाइजीरिया में जो 32 स्टेट्स हैं उनमें से 28 स्टेट्स फ्लड के अंदर हैं। स्पेन के अंदर फ्लडिंग हो रही है, चीन के अंदर पानी नहीं है, यूरोपियन हीट वेव गुजरा है। दिस इज जस्ट 1 डिग्री। वी आर सीइंग फॉरेस्ट फायर्स इन द आर्कटिक सर्कल, ओशंस acidify, coral reefs collapse, and we have plastic in our bodies. ग्रीन हाउस गैस मेजर करने के लिए हम फिजा के अंदर कार्बन की शिद्दत गिनते हैं। 2022 में इट वाज 420 पार्ट्स पर मिलियन। नाउ आपको इंसानी तारीख नहीं, इस अर्थ की तारीख में कोई 2 करोड़ साल पहले जाना पड़ेगा टू फाइंड अ प्लेस ऑन अर्थ at a time where there was 420 parts per million. ये हमारे human existence के अंदर ऐसा example आपको नहीं मिलेगा, and that was the Paleocene extinction event. Look it up. And so at 420 parts per million, now we are in a Anthropocene extinction event today. It's not something that's about to happen. We are in an extinction event. It has happened. अब इस क्लाइमेट चेंज को काबू करने के लिए 1992 में यूनाइटेड नेशंस फ्रेमवर्क कन्वेंशन ऑन क्लाइमेट चेंज वाज साइंड, और इसका मकसद था कि ग्रीन हाउस गैसेस को किसी ना किसी तरह 21वीं सदी के अंदर स्टेबलाइज कर दिया जाए। और उस स्टेबलाइजेशन के तरीके जो थे वो 2 मुख्तलिफ तरीके थे। एक जो जापानी शहर क्योटो 1996 में तय किया गया था कि सनती इनकलाब के मुकाबले में 2 डिग्री सेंटीग्रेड से ज्यादा टेम्परेचर नहीं बढ़ने देंगे। दैट वाज कॉल्ड द क्योटो प्रोटोकॉल। सिर्फ 2 डिग्रीज, उस पर लोग शोर डाल पाए। The small island states rose up in revolt and said 2 degrees centigrade corresponds to sea level rise that will wipe out their countries. Just flood them and wipe them out. तो उन्होंने लॉबी करके पेरिस में in 2016 they got the international community to agree that they would try and keep global weather and temperature within 1.5 degrees of global warming, not 2 degrees, 1.5. तो ये पेरिस और क्योटो है। मगर प्रॉब्लम ये है that since 1992 and the execution of the UNFCCC, this earth has produced more greenhouse gases than all of history earlier. All of history. कोई stabilization नहीं हुई. Nothing. As a matter of fact, at 420 parts per million, you are locked into a 1.5 degree temperature increase by the end of this decade and a 2 degree temperature increase by 2050. Ye hoga. There are no ifs and buts about it. And there are no safe amounts of climate change. Ye 1.52 degrees ke baare mein jo hum sunte hain, it's not like a motorway speed limit ke jahan usko aap cross karenge to masle chadenge. These are going to be devastating impacts to human civilization. According to one report, the difference between 1.5 and 2 degrees of global warming will be 150 million deaths, mostly because of air pollution associated with the energy and transport sectors in Asian and African cities. 150 million people is 4 times the number of soldiers who died in World War I and World War II put together. And this is it's happening here. Pakistan mein jo abhi smog season hoga, that is costing us lives, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of lives every single year. And going forward, our future is going to be 3 months of air pollution, 9 months of unlivable heat waves, coupled with unbelievable precipitation and unbelievable flooding. Food systems are going to be eviscerated. The Hindu Kush, Karakoram, Himalayan mountain ranges are over. There's no if and but. So please understand, there's no ye hone wala hai, ye ho raha hai aur hoga. So what do we do in these circumstances? Well, like Dr. Saab will give you the science, Abrar will give you the science, but we have to address and stop the drivers of the climate crisis, and they are capitalism, consumerism, patriarchy, colonialism, and the fossil fuel economy. If you don't recognize these as the drivers of the climate crisis, we have no hope in hell to do anything about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rafe. Last but not least, I'd like to ask Dr. Abrar Chaudhry, a climate finance expert from Oxford University, about the challenges of getting climate finance to Pakistan. Of course, Pakistan needs money. We're going to the COP to Egypt. We're going to be asking for loss and damage, and Dr. Abrar can fill us in. Thank you. I think he'll be connecting with us virtually from England. He was online just a couple of minutes ago.
Check if I'm audible.
Jeep, start, Dr.
I just
Abrar.
wanted to check if you can hear my voice, if you give me a thumbs up.
Yeah. Can you see me? We can hear you.
Okay, it seems everyone can hear me. I can't hear anyone, but I hope my voice is getting through.
Yes, just come close to the mic.
Hard act to follow after Rafe. I think he's made a very strong point of where we are and what we need to do, and that the climate change has arrived. And it's also, just before I start, I do want to thank Asma Jahangir Conference for inviting me, and I've known Asma ji, I knew her for a while, and she was a huge inspiration. And I want to acknowledge that as I go through, as I was thinking about what to say, I was thinking about how she would react to many of those things. So it's wonderful actually, to hear from all the different speakers. And one of the key things that, of course, you pick up is that we have developed a much stronger understanding of climate change. हमें समझ आ रही है, we're talking about loss and damage, we're talking about reparations, we're talking about mitigation and adaptation. So that has really come into our language. And we also recognize that no country has suffered more than what Pakistan has. The current flooding was just another of the disasters that we've seen, and we're seeing this more and more. But what I want to drive here is, I want to move towards action. We've heard a lot about the challenges. We've also heard a lot about the local challenges, which was fantastic to hear. But my focus today is really trying to show you two futures. And the first future is where Pakistan wants climate justice. We've been talking about climate justice. Our leaders have been going around telling the world that, we don't need charity. We need justice. We need money. And this is because of the emissions that the West has caused. And that's fair. I completely agree with this. This is what needs to happen. And we know that the COP is happening in 2 weeks. And I want to give you a future of the COP, what I think would happen in the COP. We will go there, our leaders will go there, our NGOs will go there, our communities will go there, and everyone will sympathize. Everyone will come to us and say, we feel for you. We feel what's happened to Pakistan. We feel for the population. We can see the suffering. And so personally, everyone understands, at a human to human level, we understand the suffering. We understand what's happened. But when they take a formal approach, when they go into the negotiations, things change. Because we see the world from our eyes, which is very important. But in order to be successful, we also need to see the world from other people's eyes. How is the world looking at Pakistan? How is the world operating right now? And what we see, they'll come back. They'll say, we'll give you a bit more money, but right now we're in a global recession. We have a huge energy crisis going. We have homelessness. We have other challenges that we have to deal with. There are wars happening elsewhere. There are election challenges happening. And when we go to loss and damage, they'll come back and say, yes, we understand that you need loss and damage. You need this money, but this will open up legal cases where we will be liable. Their lawyers will stop them. So what really happens, right? People want to give justice, but they'll incrementally push us forward, and they'll say, we've set up a green climate fund. We've allocated 100 billion, but that hasn't really come in. Why don't you apply for that money? Why don't you get money from there? We do sympathize, but there isn't much that can happen. And we'll keep raising our voices, right? We'll keep going back and saying, no, 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 we need this. And as Rafi was saying, it's not just going to be us. There'll be people from Sudan, there'll be people from the Horn of Africa, there'll be people from other parts of the world, because disasters are happening all over the world. And the challenge is that, our voices will start to go down. And we will have to wait for, the next disaster for us to demand more. And then we'll have the same cycle going on and on again, because there'll be something else happening. So the challenge here is that in this world, in this climate justice world, which I completely agree with, that we deserve this, we need this. It's not charity. We will be waiting for the world to come to us. We'll be praying and hoping that another disaster doesn't happen, and the world will come and step up. And that's our thinking. That's one future that I'm giving you. And I know it doesn't seem very, very hopeful, but that is a very plausible future where, we keep demanding and we keep asking and we keep seeing these disasters. And so we'll have to think, okay, what do we do with this? But there is a second future as well. And that's my provocation here, because I want to end this, on something that I think is possible, but is very uncomfortable. And that is a future where you think of Pakistan as, the headline would be Pakistan, the climate leader, leading a just transition. And what does that mean? That means that we have to make climate change our raison d'etre, which really means our reason for being. And why we should focus so much on climate change is because Pakistan is ground zero. This is where climate is happening. This is where climate meets the world. We have glaciers at one end. We heard 7,000 glaciers, 1,000 kilometers of gloss right now. The monsoons hit us. We have river systems. So if you want to see what climate disaster and what climate action or what climate challenges are, this is where Pakistan is. So this should be our number one priority. This should be our existence. And we should be thinking about it because we know that climate change has arrived. So what can we do? And this is where I want to give a few suggestions. And I want to talk to the community that's sitting here. We've got a wonderful conference with people who are actual leaders. They're the ones who will make a difference. If you look around, these are the people who can do something about climate. So I want to start with the educationist first. I feel climate change should be a core learning in every school, starting from primary schools. And the reason is because we may not exist, but the next generation is going to suffer a lot more. So they need to understand what are the challenges, what is happening outside, and they can simply walk out of their schools and actually see the challenges, see the flooding, see the poverty, see the vulnerability. So we need to expose our generation of young people to challenges and not just sit in schools and learn. We have to make sure that the educationists build programs, whether they're undergraduate program, whether they're postgraduate programs, focused on climate action, climate science. Throughout the world, there are new climate schools coming all across. Just one example, Stanford just got $1 billion funding to build a new school. The funders are not naive. They understand that this is the challenge of the future. And so the world is investing in education, training its people. And this is what Pakistan should be doing. When we look at research, I was fortunate to be in Pakistan in August, where I ran a climate workshop with many young PhD academics. And my discussion or my take with them was that I'm not here to teach you. I'm here to cooperate with you. Because what you are sitting on is a gold mine. What you are working on is what the world needs. They need data, they need information, they need to understand what's really happening on ground. And I can help you get that publication out. I can help you bring what's missing here. So we should be cooperating. We should be offering to the world that, listen, we have all the data here. We have all the information. If you want to study glaciers, come work with us, with our university. So the universities have to take this proactive approach, not wait for for justice, but bring people in. And we've seen examples in Bangladesh, in other countries where they've taken this up so strongly, and you see such fantastic research coming out that it actually keeps this issue alive. It's not just our voices, it's not just our lungs screaming for justice, it's our work, it's our research, it's our data that's talking as well. So that's my first ask for the educationists, that you can do this. You can bring climate top of the agenda. The second is the business community that I want to go towards. You know, climate change is a huge opportunity as well. It's a huge business opportunity if you think about it. Almost, I looked up this figure, $274 trillion will be required just for energy and land change transition. And other sectors have to come in this as well. So when we start to look at businesses, you realize that this is an opportunity. You know, I speak to businesses and they say, oh, you know, we're looking at technology. We're thinking of building technologies and we're trying to, you know, create these new ideas. And for all those businesses, I say, you know, you're 20 years late. It's already happened. It's gone. The era of technology is gone. Someone else has captured it. You know, Silicon Valley, Bangalore, Berlin, London, they've already made those hubs. So what we get are crumbs. And that's not going to get us anywhere. That will not make us transform. That's not where the next unicorn, those are like the $100 billion companies going to come. But climate is open right now. We are in an era which we call the era of fermentation, that there isn't a model out there. Everyone's working on this. There isn't something that's been settled. So our businesses should unlock their capital. Think about not investing in real estate, which is unproductive. The amount of money that goes in real estate, if that money went into climate innovation, believe me, we would have amazing number of companies coming out from this part. We should be the ones who should be telling the world how to manage floods, because we experience floods. When you experience something, you can tell the world, this is what happens. We should be exporting those capabilities to the rest of the world. We should be the one who should be producing net zero t-shirts or sustainable rice or low carbon milk. Yeah. Because once we start to push these products out, this is what the world needs and they will come to us. So while we can chase the $100 billion, that is for the entire developing countries, we're missing out on the trillions that are sitting there to be invested. Companies right now are looking for ways to come in, and this is where our next innovation should come in. This is where the businesses should open up and think and make themselves uncomfortable. And there's a great example, like an example I was looking. If you look at the bazooka football, you know, that came from Pakistan. That's the football that was used in the World Cup. And I looked up, you know, I did some research on that, and it was very interesting that before that football, you know, we were producing footballs by hand in Sialkot. And so one entrepreneur decided that, okay, you know, he's going to move from producing footballs from hand to setting up this machinery. He made himself uncomfortable. There were lots of challenges around it, but that paid off. So the only way we can actually progress in private sector is when we start to become uncomfortable. We start to get out of our comfort zone, not invest in the industry that are not taking us anywhere in the world, but start thinking about climate technology. And I think that's what's really needed. For the funders and the international organization, I would say, you know, don't give us a fish to eat, teach us how to fish. In my 10 years of research on climate change and climate finance, the biggest challenge, the one challenge that I've seen is that we do not have, developing countries do not have the capabilities to develop strong proposals and projects. Because you need a lot of knowledge, you need a lot of resources, you need to understand what climate change is, and there's hardly any projects coming out of Pakistan that are local where you're able to get global funding. Yes, we get projects given to us, but that's not enough. So my ask for the funders and the international organizers sitting here is, give us the capabilities, teach us how to develop those projects. don't give us projects. Because we need to develop that indigenous knowledge. We have the data, the resources, but we don't have the capacity. And as our challenges are becoming bigger, it's going to get harder and harder to get those projects. Like if you look at Green Climate Fund, of the 200 projects that have been approved, of the $11 billion that they've committed, there is one single Pakistani project, local project. I'm not talking about the international one, equal to $10 million. So the world says, we want justice, but how are we capturing those projects? How are we developing and getting the money that's already there? So for the funders, it is, help us develop those capabilities, use your money to catalyze funding and develop those skills. And then for the government, my ask is, every ministry should be a climate change ministry. And the reason why I say this is climate change on its own is meaningless. It becomes a challenge when it hits. We spoke about food security, it's climate and food security, climate energy, climate and transportation, climate and health. So every ministry needs to understand what the implications of climate are. As Ali Sheikh Saab was saying, no point in reconstructing the same houses when floods will come and destroy everything. So who's within transportation or the housing ministry is really focusing on what climate compatible or housing needs to look like. But the biggest kind of tool that the government has is public procurement. That's the biggest leverage that they have. And so the moment they start to put in climate conditions, climate obligations, you'll start to see more and more innovation happen. When you're building roads, when you're building infrastructure, I'm not saying you go all the way to the top, but start building some of these elements, energy efficiencies, and you'll see innovations happen. And I think that's a very important thing. And my last provocation or urge is for the youth, because I could see a lot of young people sitting in this room. And there's a very nice Native American proverb which says, we do not inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. And so we are custodians. We don't own this. We will at one point pass away. We will go. But what are we leaving? And so it's for this youth, and the youth will also inherit this for the next generation and so forth. And so my ask for them is, you've got the most powerful tool in your pocket right now. If you look in your pocket, you put your hand in, you'll find a phone. And that is connecting you to the entire world, to the entire network. You are closer to people or to anyone that you can imagine. So use this power, use this tool to research, to connect with the right networks, to research on climate action, find the right solutions, connect it to solutions and challenges that are on the ground. Use this power, use this technology. Because the next jobs that are coming in, like in the oil transition, we'll lose about 10 million jobs, but the green technologies will create 100 million jobs. So it's very important that we start to think about how the youth, how the young people can focus on this, because these are going to be the jobs of the future. And so my urge for them is really start thinking, start researching on these challenges. And so I'll stop here, but I just wanted to show you that these two futures, right? The first future is climate justice that we need, but here we're waiting for the world to come to us. We're sitting in our comfort zone. We're hoping something would happen. And as I showed you, these challenges are going to get bigger and they're going to get more expensive. And the other side, the other future is where Pakistan takes leadership. It develops its own resources. It gets the educationists, the private sector, the public sector, everyone working on climate change. And there's no doubt that we're not able to succeed. But the only thing we'll have to do here is to start becoming uncomfortable. And I'm pretty sure if, Asma ji is hearing this, she's someone who's always been uncomfortable. She's done things that made everyone else uncomfortable. And that's where the learning starts to come in. When you start to do things differently, that's where you start to learn. So on that very note, thank you so much And I hope, we choose a future that would help us succeed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abrar. I think we really run out of time. I'm so sorry, there's just no time for questions. We have to now move towards lunch, I think. So if you have any burning questions, all the panelists, they'll be available at lunchtime. So please ask them your questions then. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Not lunch, next session. Sorry, next session. Someone's hungry. So thank you so much for coming, and hope to see you later. Thank you, everyone, for coming and listening. Fascinating discussion. I've learned so much myself. Thank you, Ji.
Hello, mic check.
The next session, Media Under Siege, is going to start. I'm going to invite Arifa Noor Saiba to come on the stage to moderate.
I've learned through the years many lessons what activism must be all about. Activism must come with the heart, with integrity, but it must also come with the mind.
Her passion and mission.
Address that issue.
Asma Jahangir
everybody please settle down so we can begin? Okay. Welcome to Media Under Siege in India, Sri Lanka and Pakistan. Huh? वो तो कह चुके हैं, वो नहीं मान रहे ना. आ जाए आप आज. Can everybody please settle down? Oh, Allah da naam hai, सारे बह जाओ. की कर रहे हो? बेहतर है. मीर साहब ने मुझे कहा है कि जरा उर्दू में और पंजाबी में बात करो, सारे खामोश हो जाएंगे. So apologies for that. Anyway, I'll start again. Welcome to the session on media under siege in India, Sri Lanka and Pakistan. I think, you know, where the media in Pakistan is concerned, we keep talking about the pressures that we face, which seem to be increasing with every passing year. But sometimes it's also important to remember that this is something not isolated to Pakistan. Within the region, a lot of our colleagues face similar pressures. And if we look worldwide also at the moment, the media does face a number of challenges in places that we perhaps earlier did not expect it to, whether you talk about the West with its better democratic values. South Asia in itself has, of course, had a mixed record. We've also had a very lively media, unlike a lot of other countries where the democracy or the age of the nation state is still relatively young. But these have been difficult times, and I think the illustrious panel that I have here today, which has kindly agreed to join us, give us time, has a great experience and will be able to throw light on it. I will begin by inviting Hamid Mir Sahab. He needs no introduction. He has been, what shall I say, a permanent face on television since the channels were introduced to Pakistan. He has been banned twice, shot, and I think the rest I'll leave up to him. Mir Sahab.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you very much. First of all, I must pay tribute to Asma Jahangir, because all of us are here due to her struggle and her commitment for the human rights. और जो हमारा जो आज का subject है, first of all, I must tell you that when I came on the stage, so the local media, they asked me that this is an international conference and most of the speakers are speaking in English language, but there are some requirements for, so please हमारा भी ख्याल रखें, थोड़ा सा उर्दू में भी बोल लें. So before I start, I must say sorry to our honorable guest, Mr. Steve Butler, who is sitting on the stage. Mr. Steve Butler was blacklisted in 2019 just because he wrote an article in Washington Post and he criticized the anti-media policies of the then government, and he was put on the stop list. So in the first Asma Jahangir conference, he was invited, he came here, and then again he was invited and he was stopped and he was deported from Pakistan. From the Lahore airport, he was deported. So at that time, Mr. Imran Khan was the Prime Minister. And this time, he was invited again. And most of you are aware that again, he was detained on the Lahore airport. He spent 8 hours there. Finally, when there was some intervention, so he was allowed to enter in Pakistan, and now he is sitting here. But he faced a lot of pain and problem, so that's why we say sorry to him. But at least there is a difference, and Mr. Butler will agree that Last time when he was deported, nobody was able to help him. This time they tried to deport him, but he was able to send his message to some of his friends, and they intervened, and finally he was allowed. And yesterday, I am told the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Mr. Shehbaz Sharif, sent a message of sorry to Mr. Steve Butler through Law Minister, Mr. Azam Nazir Tarar. Last year when I spoke in this conference, I was banned. And I was banned for 9 months. This year, when I am talking to you, I am not banned. It's not because the government is changed. Because the situation is the same. Most of the people who are present here, they may think that I am not banned because the government is changed. This is not the case. Last year I was banned. This year there are some other people who are banned. Last year when I was banned, some of my friends in media, they were justifying the ban, and they were abusing me, accusing me. They were declaring me traitor, and they were saying it's very good that Hamid Mir is banned in Pakistan because he is anti-Pakistan. No, those journalist colleagues who were supporting a ban on me last year, now they are banned. And I condemn a ban on Arshad Sharif, I condemn a ban on Imran Riaz, I condemn a ban on Sabir Shakir, I also condemn the fake cases of treason and sedition registered against all of them. Because last year, I was facing, Asma Shirazi was facing sedition cases. This year, they are facing. So the government is changed, but the media is still under pressure. The subject of this session is the media under siege in India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. So I can give you an example, a living example, and the example is sitting with you in this hall. And when I will mention his name, you will come to know that yes, you are right, media is under siege. That gentleman can come to this conference, he can address from this podium, but he cannot appear on any TV channel in Pakistan. And his name is Manzoor Pashtun, who is sitting here. So I am very thankful to the management of Asma Jahangir conference, the organizers, that they have invited people to speak in this conference who cannot come on Pakistani media. और ये जो मैंने आपसे बात की है, ये दरअसल मैंने बात इसलिए की है कि वो हुक्मरान जो दावा करते हैं कि वो इमरान खान के दौर में मीडिया पर बड़ी पाबंदी थी, इमरान खान के दौर में पाकिस्तान जो है उसको बड़े मसाइल का सामना था, अब तो मीडिया आज़ाद हो गया है, तो बताएं कि मंजूर पश्तीन जो है वो मेरे प्रोग्राम में क्यों नहीं आ सकता? मैंने कई दफ़ा कहा कि मैं इसको बुलाना चाहता हूं, नहीं बुलाते. इस तरह और भी कुछ लोग हैं. So when I was banned last year, the World Press Freedom Index declared Pakistan on 145th number. Pakistan 145वें नंबर पे था. Now I am not banned, but the position of Pakistan declined, and now Pakistan is on 157. During last 4 years, Pakistan जो है वो World Press Freedom Index पे 18 पॉइंट नीचे आया है. आप देखें कितना नीचे आया पाकिस्तान, 18 पॉइंट नीचे आया. Pakistan lost 18 points on World Press Freedom Index in last 4 years. And in last 4 years, 24 Pakistani journalists, including 2 female journalists, they were assassinated in the line of their duty. और किसी एक भी सहाफ़ी का कातिल नहीं पकड़ा गया, ख्वाह वो पंजाब में था या सिंध में था या बलूचिस्तान में था या खैबर पख्तूनख्वा में था या किसी और जगह पे था. और आप देखें कि पिछले साल मैं इमरान खान की हुकूमत पे तनकीद कर रहा था और आज मैं शहबाज शरीफ साहब की हुकूमत जो है उसका शुक्रिया तो अदा कर दिया कि आपने स्टीवन बटलर को सॉरी कह दिया, लेकिन ये तो बताए ना कि मंजूर पश्तीन क्यों नहीं टीवी चैनल पे आ सकता. और आप जब وہ صحافی جن پر آپ کی حکومت کے دور میں بغاوت کے مقدمے درج ہوئے اور ان پر پابندی لگائی گئی اور صابر شاکر اور ارشد شریف کو پاکستان چھوڑنے پر مجبور کر دیا گیا، تو وہ کیوں پاکستان چھوڑنے پہ مجبور ہوئے؟ اس کا کوئی جواب کیوں نہیں دیتا؟ مریم اورنگزیب صاحبہ جو ہماری انفارمیشن منسٹر ہیں، وہ کہتی ہیں عمران ریاض تو جرنلسٹ ہی نہیں ہے. آپ کو سب کو پتا ہے کہ عمران ریاض جو ہے وہ میرا کتنا دشمن ہے، مجھ پہ کتنی تنقید کرتا ہے، لیکن میں یہ نہیں کہوں گا کہ مریم اورنگزیب اس کو اگر کہہ رہی ہیں کہ وہ جرنلسٹ نہیں ہے تو وہ صحیح کہہ رہی ہیں. یہ بات بالکل غلط ہے، کیونکہ جرنلسٹ جو ہے اس کا کوئی بھی ویو ہو سکتا ہے، لیکن چلیں آپ کہتی ہیں وہ پولیٹیکل ورکر ہے، تو پولیٹیکل ورکر پر بھی پابندی لگانا یہ کہاں کی جمہوریت ہے؟ یہ کہاں کی آزادی صحافت ہے؟ تو لہٰذا اس وقت پاکستان میں صرف حکومت تبدیل ہوئی ہے، حالات تبدیل نہیں ہوئے. پاکستان کا میڈیا عمران خان کے دور میں بھی غیر اعلانیہ سینسرشپ کا شکار تھا. پاکستان کا میڈیا شہباز شریف کے دور میں بھی غیر اعلانیہ سینسرشپ کا شکار ہے، اور اس پر آپ سب کو آواز بلند کرنی چاہیے. کیونکہ میں بار بار کہہ رہا ہوں صرف حکومت تبدیل ہوئی ہے، میڈیا کے حالات تبدیل نہیں ہوئے، یہ پارلیمنٹ کے حالات بھی تبدیل نہیں ہوئے. یہ دیکھیں، یہ کامران مرتضیٰ صاحب یہ سینٹ کے ممبر ہیں، یہ سپریم کورٹ بار ایسوسی ایشن کے سابق صدر ہیں. انہوں نے اور اعظم نذیر تارڑ صاحب نے مل کر ایک کوشش کی اور پارلیمنٹ کی جو کمیٹی ہے فار انفورس ڈسپیرینسز، جو لاپتہ افراد پہ کمیٹی ہے، اس کے مذاکرات کروائے جو انہوں نے کوئٹہ میں دھرنا دیا ہوا تھا، اور وہ دھرنا ختم کرایا. اور ان بیچاروں نے صرف ان کو 50 لوگوں کی ایک لسٹ دی کہ ان لوگوں کو آپ رہا بھی نہ کریں، ان کو عدالت میں بھی پیش نہ کریں، بس صرف یہ وعدہ کر لیں کہ ان کو آپ نے فیک انکاؤنٹر میں مارنا نہیں ہے. تو انہوں نے وہ لسٹ ان سے لی اور ان مظلوم لوگوں نے اپنا دھرنا کوئٹہ میں ختم کر دیا. اس کے بعد آپ جانتے ہیں کیا ہوا؟ ان کے منہ پہ زور کا تھپڑ پڑا ہے. یہ سارے جو وزیر ہیں نا ہمارے اس حکومت کے، اس لسٹ میں جو ایک معصوم سا شاعر تھا، ایک پوئٹ، اس کو نکال کر مار کے اس کی لاش پھینک دی. یہ انہوں نے، وہ کہتے ہیں جی ہم نے دہشت گرد مارا. آپ نے دہشت گرد نہیں مارا، آپ نے اعظم نذیر تارڑ اور رانا ثناء اللہ اور ان سب لوگ جو پارلیمانی کمیٹی میں، ان کے منہ پہ آپ نے زور کا تھپڑ مارا ہے. اور آپ کو شرم آنی چاہیے یہ تھپڑ مار کے کہ آپ کہتے ہیں یہ جو شاعر تھا یہ دہشت گرد تھا. دہشت گرد وہ ہے جو پاکستان کا آئین توڑتا ہے. چلے مان لیا کہ وہ دہشت گرد تھا، تو پھر آپ میں اور دہشت گرد میں فرق کیا ہے؟ دہشت گرد بھی پاکستان کا قانون توڑتا ہے، آپ بھی پاکستان کا قانون توڑتے ہیں. یہ بات ہم پاکستان کے میڈیا پہ نہیں کہہ سکتے. جب یہ بات منظور پشتین کہتا ہے تو کہتے ہیں یہ بھی دہشت گرد ہے. تو اگر یہ دہشت گرد ہے تو پھر آپ اور میں، ہم سارے دہشت گرد ہیں. دیکھیں فرق کیا ہے کہ ایک طرف ہماری حکومت جو ہے اس کی جو ترجمان ہے انفارمیشن منسٹر صاحبہ، وہ ان صحافیوں کو صحافی ماننے کے لیے تیار نہیں ہے جن پر آج کل پابندی ہے. تو دوسری طرف جو عمران خان صاحب ہیں وہ کہتے ہیں وہ سلیم صافی جو ہے وہ سلیم صافی نہیں، وہ سلیم لفافی ہے. اور غریدہ فاروقی صاحبہ، ان کے بارے میں کتنی قابل اعتراض زبان استعمال کی. دونوں میں کوئی فرق نہیں ہے. یہ جو اس وقت حکمران اتحاد ہے، آپ دیکھیں یہ بھی وہی کام کر رہے ہیں جو پہلے عمران خان کر رہا تھا. تو اس لیے آسما جہانگیر کانفرنس جو ہے، اس کے پلیٹ فارم سے ہم یہ مطالبہ کرتے ہیں کہ وہ پالیسیاں جن کی وجہ سے پاکستان کا میڈیا جو ہے وہ ورلڈ پریس فریڈم انڈیکس پہ مسلسل نیچے آ رہا تھا، آپ ان پالیسیوں کو ختم کریں. یہ مطالبہ ہم اس لیے کر رہے ہیں کہ آپ ان پالیسیوں کو آگے بڑھا رہے ہیں اور آپ کو اس میں کوئی نہ ندامت ہے نہ شرم ہے، بلکہ آپ کہتے ہیں کہ ہمارے ملک میں تو پاکستان کا میڈیا آزاد ہو گیا ہے، عمران خان کے دور میں میڈیا آزاد نہیں تھا. ایک اور بات میں آپ کو کہنا چاہتا ہوں کہ یہ جو سلیم صافی اور غریدہ فاروقی کے بارے میں بات کی جاتی ہے یا اور جو ہمارے صحافی ہیں ان کے بارے میں بات کی جاتی ہے نا، تو یہ صرف غیر ریاستی عناصر بات نہیں کرتے. ایک سوچی سمجھی سازش کے تحت فیک نیوز کو پاکستان کے میڈیا کی آزادی چھیننے کے لیے ایک ویپن کے طور پہ استعمال کیا جا رہا ہے. Some state institutions are using fake news to subvert the media freedom in Pakistan. They are spreading disinformation against different journalists and media organizations. جس طرح عمران خان صاحب کہتے ہیں نا کہ وہ فلاں بندہ جو ہے وہ پیسے لے کے فلاں ٹی وی چینل نے میرے خلاف سازش کی، اسی طرح کچھ ریاستی اداروں کے لوگ جو ہیں وہ بھی یہی بات کرتے ہیں. وہ کہتے ہیں جی آپ سارے ٹیکس چور ہیں. تو اگر ہم سارے ٹیکس چور ہیں تو ٹیکس چوری میں ہمیں اندر کر دو بھائی, کیوں نہیں کرتے آپ اندر؟ تو اس لیے میں یہ کہنا چاہوں گا کہ اگر کوئی یہ سمجھتا ہے کہ پاکستان کے حالات بہتر ہو رہے ہیں, وہ ایمکو کی جنت میں رہتا ہے. بلکہ میں آج آپ کو ایک اور بات کہنا چاہتا ہوں, بڑی ذمہ داری کے ساتھ بات کر رہا ہوں, کہ اگر کوئی یہ سمجھتا ہے کہ پاکستان کے حالات جو ہیں وہ بہتری کی طرف جا رہے ہیں, اور اب دنیا جو ہے اس کے حالات بھی بدل گئے ہیں, اور اب تو پاکستان میں مارشل لا نہیں لگ سکتا. بھائی ابھی 24 گھنٹے پہلے میں نے ایک جگہ پہ مارشل لا کی بات بار بار سنی ہے, صرف 24 گھنٹے پہلے. اور اگر میں سمجھتا ہوں کہ اگر آپ نے پاکستان میں دوبارہ ایسے حالات پیدا کیے سیاسی جماعتوں نے یا کسی اور نے, اور مارشل لا لگ گیا, تو اس سے پاکستان کو نقصان ہوگا. مارشل لا نے ہمیشہ پاکستان کو نقصان پہنچایا ہے. پاکستان جب ٹوٹا تو مارشل لا تھا. آپ کہتے ہیں کہ جو ایسٹ پاکستان میں آپ کی ڈیفیٹ تھی, ملٹری ڈیفیٹ نہیں تھی, پولیٹیکل ڈیفیٹ تھی. چلے مان لیتے ہیں پولیٹیکل ڈیفیٹ تھی. پولیٹیکل ڈیفیٹ اس لیے تھی کہ شیخ مجیب الرحمان کے خلاف پاکستان آرمی کا ایک فوجی جنرل غلام عمر جو ہے, اس نے ایک سیل بنایا ہوا تھا, اور وہ شیخ مجیب الرحمان کے سیاسی مخالفین میں پیسے بانٹتا تھا. جیسے بعد میں 88 میں بھی آئی جی آئی بنائے گئی اور پیسے بانٹے گئے, اور اس کے بعد بھی پیسے بانٹے گئے, تو 1970 کے الیکشن میں یہ کام شروع ہوا, پولیٹیکل انٹرونشن, اور ابھی تک یہ سلسلہ چل رہا ہے. تو شکر ہے کہ 1970 میں پاکستان کا میڈیا آزاد نہیں تھا, ورنہ آج آپ نے کہنا تھا کہ وہ پاکستان جو ہے وہ انڈیا نے نہیں توڑا تھا, وہ پاکستان کے میڈیا نے توڑ دیا تھا, آپ نے یہ کہنا تھا. اور آخر میں یہ کہوں گا کہ اس وقت پاکستان میں کچھ ڈریکونین لا ہیں. Unfortunately, these draconian laws were not imposed on us by any military dictator. These draconian laws were imposed on us by democratic governments. جیسا کہ 2016 میں جو مسلم لیگ نون کی حکومت تھی, اس نے پیکا کا قانون ہم پہ امپوز کیا, اور وہ پیکا کا قانون آج ان پہ استعمال کیا جا رہا ہے. اسی طرح یہ جو پچھلی عمران خان کی حکومت تھی, اس نے پیکا آرڈیننس جاری کیا, اور آج جب ایف آئی اے کسی صحافی کو اور سیاستدان کو گرفتار کرتی ہے تو اس پہ وہی پیکا قانون کی سیکشن 20 لگاتی ہے. تو یہ سارے قانون جو ہے یہ ختم ہونی چاہیے, ان کے خلاف یہاں پہ ایک قرارداد منظور ہونی چاہیے, اور اس قرارداد میں یہ مطالبہ کیا جانا چاہیے کہ جو پاکستان کی الیکٹڈ پارلیمنٹ ہے, یہ پارلیمنٹ پاکستان کے آئین اور قانون کے تحفظ کے لیے کوئی کردار ادا کرے, صرف نوکری نہ کرے, ہاتھ باندھ کے کھڑی ہے اور جی سر کیے جا رہی ہے. اور جوڈیشری بھی جو ہے اس کو بھی کھڑا ہونے کی ضرورت ہے. اتنی ڈیوائیڈڈ جوڈیشری پاکستان کی ہسٹری میں ہم نے کبھی نہیں دیکھی. تو جب پارلیمنٹ مضبوط نہیں ہوگی, جوڈیشری ڈیوائیڈڈ ہوگی, تو میڈیا کی فریڈم کو تحفظ کہاں سے ملے گا؟ تو اس تحفظ کے لیے آپ سب کو, ہم سب کو مل کے اکٹھے ایک جدوجہد کرنی ہے. اور اس بات پہ ختم کروں گا حبیب جالب کے شعر پہ کہ جھوٹے مقدمات ہیں, فرضی شہادتیں, ہم پھر بھی لکھ رہے ہیں جنوں کی حقائقیں.
Thank you, Mir Saab, for a very rousing speech. Stephen Butler, you have quite the hard act to follow. He already is known to all of us thanks to the fact that he was banned from the country last year. That's the surefire way of getting fame in Pakistan. But he made it this year. He is now the journalist and a senior program consultant committee to protect journalists.
Thank you, Arifa, and thank you, Hamid, for those very nice words. I want to thank the staff of the Asma Jahangir Foundation for the incredible work that they did to make it possible for me to come here. And I'd also like to thank the government of Pakistan for opening the door. I should say a few words about what happened last Thursday when I arrived, because there has been some misreporting about what happened, and I'd like to set the record straight. I believe what happened was a lack of communication inside the Pakistani government. I was given a visa and a welcome from the Interior Ministry, but the FIA, which controls the immigration, did not get word that I was to be allowed into the country, and so they stopped. And they stopped because they were not allowed to let me enter as long as my name appeared on their computer. But I have to say, I was there for those 8 hours, and they were rather kind to me. I was not interrogated. I was not abused in any way. I was offered food and water and a place to sleep until it was possible for them to get clear instructions about what to do. So I think they were highly professional. Whatever mistake was made, it was not by the people who stopped me. I truly regret what happened in 2019 when I was immediately turned back. And why is that? Of course, it was very inconvenient, but it ended a period of long, open communication between my organization, the Committee to Protect Journalists, and the government of Pakistan. We have for years sent delegations of senior journalists and senior board members to meet with Pakistan's prime ministers and senior officials of all kind, and we tell them what we think. And they listen to us and they tell us what they think. And that was a very healthy process that was unfortunately brought to an end. The Committee to Protect Journalists and Reporters Without Borders, I think globally, we form a network that supports press freedom everywhere. That's our goal, and I think it's an important aspect of the international media scene. It's true that I and my colleagues have said highly critical things about the way that Pakistan treats its journalists. But Pakistan is not unique in that in any way. Take a look at what we say about Iran, about India, about China. You'll find we speak very openly and very critically. But I can say unequivocally, we are not against Pakistan in any way. We are not anti-Pakistan. Neither were we for or against the government of Imran Khan. We are neither for nor against the government of Shehbaz Sharif. We are not against the army. We are not against the intelligence services. We are certainly not against the judiciary. What we are for is the journalists. Our work, we try to promote it so that journalists can work without interference and without fear of retaliation for what they do. But aside from this, we also see what happened to me in 2019 when I was turned back as part of a sign of the times. At roughly the same time, a few months earlier, two colleagues of mine who were visiting Tanzania were detained and interrogated, and their equipment was seized. These are the first two incidents, I think, in the history of CPJ where our representatives have been treated in this sort of hostile manner by authorities. And what we are witnessing is, frankly, we see this as part of a worldwide decline of press freedom that very much includes the United States. I was looking over some statistics. In 2020, in the United States, there are documented 630 assaults of journalists. 630 assaults of journalists in a country where press freedom is considered an absolutely fundamental value. Those assaults were associated with the election campaign and also the Black Lives Matter demonstrations. But still, it's a shocking number. Those numbers of assaults went down last year, but still remained at a rather high level. This year in Mexico, 13 journalists have been killed so far, and there is not even a war there. In Ukraine, 15 journalists have died. In Haiti, 5 journalists have been killed. And the Philippines, 4 journalists have been killed so far this year. If you look at the imprisoned counts, in Iran, just in the past 6 weeks, 41 journalists have been put in jail. 41 journalists. In Myanmar this year is likely to be the #1 jailer of journalists, 51. China, it will be right up there, although a few journalists we've been able to document who are associated with the Uyghur journalist and scholar Ilan Tohti have been released. We've been able to get in touch with them. There are a large number of journalists in jail in Vietnam, Turkey, and Egypt. In Afghanistan, the media industry has, I won't say it's completely collapsed, but it's under tremendous pressure, and it's just a faint shadow of what it was before August 15th. And in India, next door, the press is under tremendous pressure. I mean, just look what is happening in Kashmir. It's shameful that these journalists, they go to jail there, the courts ordered bail, and yet they are rearrested on different charges, and so they never get out. So I'm going to surprise many of you by saying that despite all of the difficulties that our friend Hamid Mir just described, which are very, very real, in some ways I feel that Pakistan is a bright spot in this region. Why? Because you look at the journalists, you look at the quality of the journalists, you look at the determination, you look at the bravery, you look at the talent, and there is very much to build on. So this is my hope that Pakistan can use this foundation of high-quality journalism and the tradition to rebuild much of what has come under pressure, in the last few years. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Just one short announcement before I invite the next speaker. ARY had also been invited to speak at the panel today. They had also kindly accepted, but because of some sports-related issues, I think there's some cricket match going on, so they got rather busy with that and they couldn't make it, but they were invited, especially because, sorry, my knowledge of cricket is abysmal, but I do know that there was something to do with cricket, and that's why, despite the fact that they had accepted the invitation, because they are under fire these days, but they couldn't make it. I will now break the order of speakers a little bit. I think after two male speakers, it's important to now have a woman talk about it. So I'd like to invite Malini Subramaniam. She's an independent journalist and the former head International Committee of the Red Cross. She has reported extensively on human rights violations in India. So hopefully, apart from talking about the press and the siege it is under in India, she will also talk about reporting in conflict zones.
Thank you. See, right at the outset, I wish to express my deep gratitude for being invited to this conference. Primarily also because a lot of Indians love to come to Pakistan, and I'm really, really grateful, and I was amazed at the warmth that I came across here from people in the conference, from people on the streets, and they immediately reached out to us saying that, oh, you're from India and most welcome. So thank you so much, and I hope more and more Indians come and more Pakistanis go to India. And I think it's important that we do this exchange of people rather than get caught in cricket politics and politicians themselves who really make it difficult for people's transit and friendship. Of course, Asma Jahangir is somebody whom we have always looked up to. We in India, she's a household name amongst the human rights activists. I've not met her, but I've always followed her work. And it's so privileged, I feel, to be engulfed in the warmth that she has left behind her work and the continuum that continues to happen now with her family, with her friends, and with all her well-wishers, not just in Pakistan, and I think all over the globe. So I'm extremely happy to be here again in this particular conference. Thank you so much for inviting me. To be in Pakistan is definitely it's a great experience, because in India, what we get to see that if you are talking anything against the government policies, and they said, "Acha, to ye baat hai, go to Pakistan." So here I am in Pakistan. I must say that I did not face too much difficulties coming over, and it was rather smooth, unlike my colleague Stephen, who had to go through some kind of a trouble time. But Lahore especially, I must bring in a little bit of personal context that I'm married into a Punjabi family, and my in-laws hail from Pakistan, and before the partition, they moved to India, and they really hold very pleasant memories. My father-in-law's families come from Quetta, and my mother-in-law's family come from Sargodha. And I was very keen to visit Sargodha, to a village called Farooqi, where she narrated. She's 83-year-old, and I met her, and she said that in Farooqi, when she came about a couple of months before the partition, sometime in January 1947 for a wedding, and she said the entire village was there and there was a lot of happiness. There was no clue that there's going to be a partition. बिल्कुल एहसास नहीं था कि कोई partition होने वाला है. Or finally when they had to leave, she of course came in much earlier, but her other family members, when they came, there was a sarpanch, a Muslim sarpanch in Farooqi village, who ensured that everybody moved out of their village safely. Unfortunately, there were a few killings. She said about 6 of her cousins, male cousins, got killed, and the sarpanch was so devastated, and he said that mere safed chadar nu daag lag gaye. So he was very saddened to, but all the same, I wanted to visit Farooqi and see if his family is still there, and probably even tell them that, you know, they have people in India who hold pleasant memories about the village. And also to be able to write about it, primarily because of the kind of hatred that is being right now spewed amongst the minority community in India. And what I'm going to now come back to the topic that I'm going to discuss, you will see that it will resonate what I'm actually talking about. Now, as I stand before this very distinguished guest, I must say that, you know, we're going to talk about media siege, but I'll give you a few examples of some of the journalists. So as I stand here, Siddiqui Kappan, a 43-year-old journalist from Kerala, is spending his 749th day in prison. And mind you, this despite the fact that he's got a bail from the Supreme Court. So 2 years back, he goes to a village in Hathras in order to cover the case of a 19-year-old Dalit girl who was gang raped and murdered with, of course, in complicity with the police and the state government. So when he goes to cover this news along with some of his friends, he's immediately arrested, and he's been saying that he's been charged with sedition, with outraging religious feelings, he's a Muslim, raising funds, and conspiring to commit terrorist activity. This is a journalist who went to cover a news of atrocity against a Dalit girl. Now, why does Kappan continue to remain in jail? Because of some subsequent charges against him, of him being a member of the Popular Front of India. Now, Popular Front of India is an organization which primarily works for the Muslim community in India. And very recently, in September 2022, which is his last month, the Home Minister has banned this organization. Now, Siddiqui Kappan is going to be very difficult for him to come out, because now they have charged that he was raising funds, and PFI was actually giving him funds to cover this news in order to create a lot of trouble for the country. So the enforcement director, which is now a very convenient arm for our government to, you know, slap a lot of cases of money laundering. Now this, and also to fix opposition and opponents, political opponents and dissenters, it has alleged that PFI has funded Siddiqui Kappan's visit to the village in order to disturb communal harmony, instigating riots and speeding terror. Yeah? So this is Siddiqui Kappan, who now continues to be in jail despite the Supreme Court order for bail. Look at the case of Rana Ayub. She's a fiery journalist, and she's been going hammer and tong against the BJP, and she's made no bush about it. And she was charge-sheeted very recently by the enforcement director under, once again, the infamous Prevention of Money Laundering Act, for having raised and collected 2.70 crores for helping people during the pandemic, but not utilizing the funds fully for the purpose. They have, like, you know, made charges that she's put some money into her personal account, she's transferred the money to her father's account, everything of which she's denied, but she will have to sort of prove herself out of it. She's not arrested. But Ayub's, the resentment of the BJP government against Rana Ayub goes back in 2011 because she has been doing a lot of investigative work in the Gujarat riots of 2002, where she said that the current Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Home Minister Mr. Amit Shah, they are actually involved in the killings of over 1,000 Muslims in the Gujarat 2002 riots. Her book by the name of Gujarat Files is already out, and they are extremely upset about it. Yeah? Now, look at what some of our ministers, not the current one, the earlier Minister for Information and Broadcasting says. So, these are journalists who have been writing, who have been investigating with evidence, with fact-checking, and giving news. So what does he say? Freedom of press is very important today, but any freedom comes with responsibility. So there has to be responsible freedom and no sensationalization by the press. News should not be deliberately defaming anyone. Yeah? So they will decide who is being defamed. So like in most countries, India too has adhered to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and Article 19(1). It ensures the fundamental rights and right to freedom of speech and expression. However, there is a subclause, 19(2), which imposes reasonable restrictions. So what it does, it allows the government to frame laws to impose reasonable restrictions in the interest of sovereignty and integrity of India, security of the states, friendly relations with foreign state, public order, decency and morality, and contempt of court, defamation and incitement to an offense. So all these exceptions are there, and they find it very convenient to book people exactly in these sections and tell the journalists are using freedom of press for other things. Now, talking about decency and morality, it brings us to another case of Mohammed Zubair. Now, he gave an old tweet of, in 2018, where he says that before 2014, mark the year, before 2014, Honeymoon Hotel became Hanuman Hotel after 2014. Now, this was an old tweet from an old film that he tweeted from a film called Kisi Se Na Kehna, but he was again charged for hurting religious sentiments. Yeah? Now, Zubair, who is Mohammed Zubair? Zubair, along with Prateek Sinha, another person, journalist, he set up a fact-finding website. It's called the Alt News in 2017, and has been methodically debunking the severe propaganda that BJP's IT cell, they have been putting up fake news, they have been putting up news about, various personalities, including the opponents, in order to defame people. And Alt News has been also very, very clearly monitoring hate speeches. So they looked at an opportunity when somebody can complain about it, and immediately he was put in jail. So now after, Zubair also tweeted about the comments made by the BJP spokesperson insulting Prophet Muhammad during a television debate, and that got really widely covered because he has 100,000 followers. Now his tweet got so widely shared that several Muslim countries, including the UAE, the Saudi Arabia, the Qatar and Iran, really made it difficult for the BJP government, and they had to actually suspend the BJP spokesperson. Although initially they said that these are fringe elements, but they were forced to suspend her. Now what happens, people like Zubair and other people, once you're in prison, there are several cases against you, and he was put several cases against him from different cities, and from Delhi, from Uttar Pradesh. So you come out of one case, there's another case filed against you, so you have to fight against the other case. Now, thankfully, a bail was applied for in the Supreme Court, and finally the Supreme Court put all the cases together, asked the Delhi court to look into it, and so that he can walk free. Now, thankfully the Supreme Court, when the UP government said that there should be a clause in Zubair's bail that he should be refrained from tweeting. And thankfully the Supreme Court came back to say that it's like asking a lawyer not to argue. a person not to speak. Whatever he does, he will be responsible in law, but we can't ask a journalist to write. So thanks for that. The Supreme Court came out with that. Now, you would wonder, because of the first few names that I gave are of Muslim journalists, is that so? Is a question that should come into everybody's mind. But no, I had several other examples. Teesta Setalwat, for example, she also moved against the, became a co-petitioner for one of the Gujarat riots, and as soon as she, 16 years, she followed a case, and she was immediately, the case was turned against her, and she was put in prison. Today, Zubair is out on bail. Today, Teesta Setalwat also out on bail. I have been reporting from the conflict zones of Bastar. Probably people, I do not know, maybe not know where Bastar exactly is. Bastar is a region in the state of Chhattisgarh, which is in central India, and it has been having the presence of CPI Maoists, which is a banned party, and the government has been really under the pretext of wiping out the Maoists or putting an end to the Maoist struggle. They have been actually not successful, but instead, in order to show that they are successful or they are able to continue to do their work, they are pulling up innocent villagers, arresting them. There are extrajudicial killings. In fact, what was spoken about in Balochistan yesterday, the session, it resonated a lot with me about what's happening in Bastar. The Adivasis in Bastar are asking for teachers and educationists and health professionals, but what you're getting is forge. There are a lot of checkposts, and primarily because the checkposts are important so that the extractive industries can come, because that's a region which is rich in mineral resources. Yeah. I'm going to stop here because there is a very little time, and India is a huge country, and I can go on and on about it. I want to only say that, end up by saying that whether it is a central government which wants to apparently declare India to be a Hindu Rashtra, or whether the state governments within the region, even if whichever the party is, they wish to extract the minerals, they will use these enemies, they will create the enemies like the Naxalites or the Muslims. They will create a huge hype around them and actually not allow journalists to do their work and not allow the civil society to function. And this is exactly the use in order to repress the civil society and the journalists. And it's important that the entire fraternity needs to come together in order to challenge this, because there is a much bigger ulterior motive of the government to go ahead with this process of putting the media under complete siege. Thank you.
Thank you. May I now invite Mr. Daniel Bastard he's the Asia Pacific Director, Reporters Without Borders, and he's going to talk about the Press Freedom Index. Thank you.
Thank you. First, I want to express my deepest gratitude to the people behind the Asma Jahangir conference. I'm really impressed by the quality of the sessions of the debate here. I think it's a very precious moment and a precious conference. I'm going to try to talk about the three countries we're dealing with today, which are Pakistan, India, and Sri Lanka. And for that, I'm going to use the World Press Freedom Index. So it's basically this map. As you can see, the world has turned very red, and red means bad. More concretely, if we look at Pakistan, India, and Sri Lanka, India and Sri Lanka is light red, and Pakistan is dark red, which means bad or very bad situation. Very concretely, out of 180 countries, Sri Lanka is ranked 146, India 150, and Pakistan is in position 157. If we look at Bangladesh, it's just behind at 162. So we see that these 3 or 4 countries are really tightly bunched in the last third of the ranking. And if we look into details behind these number, It's interesting to see on which points the situation is really bad or a little better. In order to come up with this ranking we do at Reporters Without Borders, we have developed 5 indicators about the way media and press freedom can thrive and flourish or can regress. So these 5 indicators are first the political influence over the media, the economic conditions in which the news are produced, then legislative framework, social and sociological factors, and last but not least, the security and safety of journalists. And when we look at this very last indicator, the security of journalists, this is the most weighty indicator in the score of India and Pakistan. Last year, 3 journalists were killed because of their job of reporting news. In Pakistan and India, the number is 4 journalists killed in 2021. So this is really preoccupying. This is the very harshest violence against journalists. Sri Lanka hasn't seen any dead journalists for a few years now, but it was really, really bad 15 years ago. And the physical attacks against journalists in Sri Lanka are very, very worrying as well. The second most preoccupying issue with press freedom in these 3 countries has to deal with political interference with media freedom. That's especially true in Pakistan with these repeated meddlings and crackdowns by the military establishment, the almighty military establishments against the media. That's really a serious concern, a long-term concern in Pakistan. These political problems are very much at stake in Sri Lanka as well, where the media are very polarized and often have to follow a line. And the trend is less visible in India, but it's still very strong. I think it's just less seen in data because in our figures because of the diversity of the country, which is greater in India than in Pakistan, Sri Lanka. This political interference has to be corroborated with a very high level of concentration, of media concentration in all these 3 countries. The economic conditions under which the media and the news is produced in these 3 countries is still very problematic. On one hand, there is often a very strong leverage between big media houses and political parties and political leaders, and that's a big problem. On the other hand, grassroots journalists who work on the ground, live often in a very deep financial insecurity with very low wages, very poor working conditions, or sometimes with some wages that are just not paid for months. And that's something that is really, really critical in Pakistan, notably. And in the end, this situation of strong economic influence over the media is very badly impacting the independence of newsroom and, of course, the plurality of viewpoints inside media houses. When you have one media houses which is clearly associated with one political parties, they would have some very partial view on other political parties. And very concretely, for journalists, for editors, for chief editors, they know that they have to follow a line that is imposed in some way by their media owner and their political affiliates. And these journalists, these editors, these chief editors, they also know that there are implicit red lines that should not be crossed. More or less implicit red lines, that's where the trick is. But I'm talking about political red lines. People in Pakistan are well aware of these red lines, like you cannot talk about the military very freely, you have to be very cautious. But I'm talking here about social red lines as well. Some subjects are clearly taboo in South Asia and in these three countries we're talking about today. We can take, for instance, the fate of Tamil people in Sri Lanka, the fate of Kashmiri in India, or ethnic or religious minorities in Pakistan, Christians, Hindus, Ahmadiyyas. And in the end, this leads to a misrepresentation of large parts of its country population, including minorities like Dalit or Adivasis in India, Muslim minorities in India and in Sri Lanka. But it also impacts the way gender minorities are reported in these countries. And this underrepresentation is also including not a minority, but a vast majority, which is the question of women's rights. Women-related issues are clearly underrepresented in South Asian media for two main reasons. First, women journalists still are much less represented in media houses, especially in executive positions, and also the subjects that are treated in the media are not really focused on women issue, except in some niche media that are really specialized in this issue. But in mainstream media, it's very it's not so common to find really in-depth inquiries and investigation about the way women live in these free countries. Finally, this picture I've just drawn is a bit pessimistic. There is one striking point in these three countries, and that is what we have remarked in our World Press Freedom Index, is the legislative framework. In our data, the legislative framework is the indicator where the two countries perform the best. In each country's constitution or law, there are legal guarantees for the free flow and information, and it's not so common. For myself, I've been a correspondent in China during 6 years, and I can say that there is no legal guarantee at all in theory and in practice. So this is, I mean, South Asia has really something encouraging with these legal guarantees. But of course the problem is the implementation of these guarantees. This is where the problem really stands. And this calls for action by relevant institutions to make sure that these guarantees are properly enforced and that in the end the rule of law is effectively enforced. I think that's really the key and what we have to work on with the judiciary here, which has proved very voluntary, as what I've seen in the debates. And this is very urgent because in all three countries the score in the World Press Freedom Index has been deteriorating for several years. So there is a clear regression of media freedom, which means there is a clear emergency to tackle all these problems. And we all need to act now, inside the country, outside, through confrontation, debate, cooperation, and exchange of viewpoints, so that the media will remain the fourth pillar of democracy, and I think this is really urgent. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now be inviting our colleague from Sri Lanka. She's joining us virtually, Dilrukshi Handuneti. She's an international award-winning investigative journalist and lawyer from Sri Lanka. She will obviously talk about the challenges of reporting from conflict zones, as well as the kind of political and economic crises that the country has been going through and the challenges that it has thrown up for the people who are reporting on it. So
Welcome, Dilrukshi.
Thank you so much. Can you all hear me? Is it possible to hear me?
Please go ahead.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much for having me. But I think after Daniel, there is very little to be said about Sri Lanka, perhaps. And he unpacked most of our countries in the region and why we are all looking very red. And as you all know, Sri Lanka does look very red, but I just listening to all four speakers, I felt that perhaps I should think about, explaining the situation in Sri Lanka, not only for reporters, not only for journalists who are covering the current crisis, but about the human rights situation in general as well. There was a popular uprising in April when Sri Lanka's escalating financial crisis spilled onto the streets of Colombo and then spread to elsewhere, which also was reflective of a very deep-rooted political crisis, a human rights crisis. Many crises were represented, but I would think that we were recognizing that Sri Lanka for long has been tolerating many things, and this includes probably the region's largest nepotism project. All of you know that Sri Lanka was, until recently, we had a massive family rule, and the protesters were able to get the former president Gotabaya Rajapaksa to resign as a result of the protests. And then there was Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa who also stepped down. And the other Rajapakshas who were also holding office, different portfolios and in power in different forms, were all forced to step down from their duties at that time. But if you thought that Sri Lanka was going to rewrite history and to have a different story to tell, I think we can acknowledge the fact that we are not telling that different story. The Sri Lankan foreign minister was speaking, addressing the UN General Assembly just a few days ago, and he was speaking about freedom of expression and how important it is to have freedom of expression protected in Sri Lanka. We do know that we have leaders who speak about rights, who speak to the international community, and there is a separate lingo when you speak about the rights-based approach when you speak at such fora. But at the same time, on the same day, around the same time, 84 activists from Socialist Youth Forum were arrested. And to date, from the data I have, over 3,800 people have been arrested, all of them associated with the recent protests. And at least 1/3 of those people are still under detention. So that's, in a nutshell, that's what Sri Lanka is. And clearly, these arbitrary arrests, the harassment, continuous harassment of journalists, artists, activists associated with the protests and months-long protests is an ongoing thing for Sri Lanka. The global condemnation has not done much to change the situation here. The cracking down on dissent still continues, and there is a clear witch hunt of the protesters, and people actually live in fear. People are scared to speak, freely express themselves, or to speak, share even posts on social media, because there is a lot of surveillance which people would not even want to acknowledge publicly anymore for the fear of reprisal. The public's demand for regime change was something that a lot of journalists, a lot of social media activists, the YouTube community in Sri Lanka, they have done a tremendous job in highlighting the situation in Sri Lanka. It cannot be separated. At a point, the journalists were part of that struggle, and in Sri Lanka, journalists were representing that voice. As a result, they were also at the receiving end. But the failure to govern and to commit such economic crimes as done in Sri Lanka is something that journalists should be discussing, should be raising, and also instead of instead of the witch hunt that we witnessed in Sri Lanka, it would have been probably ideal to have some kind of attempt to be made to recover the stolen assets, to ensure there is justice and fair play. And I go back to something that Steve said about Sri Lanka, the fact that, and also Daniel, that there are no deaths, there are no killings of journalists, but it does not mean Sri Lanka is the perfect place, or it has never been really, because we've been one of the most violent places for journalists to live in and to work in. It changes for a while, but impunity has come to stay. And a case in point is that I would like to refer to the Permanent People's Tribunal. I just want to highlight this because it did deliver a very important verdict recently in The Hague about, and it held the Sri Lankan government responsible for what has happened. And I refer to the murder of my former editor, Lasantha Wickramatunge. And in this inquiry, there was something that I would like to mention, and the verdict did say that his right to life, freedom of expression, and effective remedy were all denied. And when you, it is not just about him, it's about all of us working in Sri Lanka, all journalists in Sri Lanka and not working in Sri Lanka, not just in South Asia, but the rest of the world as well. Impunity is something that we as a region got to tackle. And this was an emblematic case only that where we learn that the state can actually get to the messenger and take your life for speaking the truth. And because we also talk about media under siege, I also want to mention something that I thought would be appropriate, because this is also South Asian space. We do not have the opportunity to report on each other. Our narratives are largely constructed by different sections of the media. Sometimes it's deeply political. And listening to all of you, I felt the opportunity to report Pakistani journalists to visit India, or Indian journalists to visit Pakistan, and to understand and report on our people, on the issues that journalists or journalists face would not be possible. So who prevents us from having that access? Who prevents us from telling these stories is also something I think we should discuss. And that's also because when we talk about media under siege, this is also one way of controlling free speech of stories that matter about our own understanding of our region as well. I think I wouldn't want to take a lot of time, simply because probably it's 2:08 in Colombo. Probably we can take some questions, and I think that you might want to ask questions about Sri Lanka rather than me offering a summary which is of my own.
Thank you. Thank you, Dilrukshi. Our last guest is Afzal Bhatt Sahab. He's the president of the PFUJ Pakistan, and he will now talk about some of the issues facing our journalists, especially in terms of their employment.
बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम। सबसे पहले मैं आसमा जहांगीर फाउंडेशन को खराज तहसीन पेश करता हूँ कि जिन्होंने आज के इस घुटन के दौर में भी इतनी शानदार कॉन्फ्रेंस का इनेकाद किया और लोगों को बोलने का मौका दिया। हाल में बैठे हुए सब लोग, क्योंकि पीएफजे की हिस्ट्री से वाकिफ हैं कि गुज़श्ता 70 साल से पीएफजे ने प्रेस फ्रीडम के लिए, शहरी आज़ादियों के लिए, जमहूरियत और जमहूरी इदारों के इस्तेहकाम के लिए एक तवील जद्दोजहद किया। उस पर बात नहीं करूँगा, क्योंकि आज का हमारा मौजू है कि आजकल हम किस किस्म की पाबंदियों का सामना कर रहे हैं। तो आज जब हम माजी के हालात को देखते हैं तो मुझे लगता है कि जो अनाउंस सेंसरशिप थी वो बहुत बेहतर थी आज की अनअनाउंस सेंसरशिप के मुकाबले में। आजकल ان اناؤنس سینسرشپ کے لیے جو ہتھیار استعمال کیے جا رہے ہیں ان کا آپ لوگوں کو ادراک ضرور ہونا چاہیے. 4-5 قسم کے ویپن آج کل جرنلسٹوں کے خلاف استعمال ہو رہے ہیں. پہلا ہتھیار پرانا ہے لیکن استعمال اب زیادہ ہو رہا ہے کہ جو جرنلسٹ بولتا ہے، لکھتا ہے، بات کرتا ہے، اس کے خلاف غیر اخلاقی مہم چلا دی جائے، اس پر غیر اخلاقی الزامات کی بوچھاڑ کر دی جائے تاکہ اس کی کمیونٹی اس کو ڈیفینڈ نہ کر سکے، تاکہ سول سوسائٹی اس کے ساتھ کھڑی نہ ہو سکے، اس کے قریبی عزیز اس کے ساتھ کھڑے نہ ہو سکے. جس کی واضح مثال ان 2 مہینوں کے دوران بھی ہوئی. ملتان میں ہمارے بہت اچھے جرنلسٹ ہیں، شکیل احمد، ڈان کے بیورو چیف رہے، آج کل بے روزگار ہیں. ان کے خلاف اور اخبار کے چیف رپورٹر کے خلاف ایک خاتون کے اغوا کا مقدمہ درج کر لیا گیا. پہلے ہم سوچتے رہے کہ کیا بات کریں اس کے اوپر، کہ جب ایف آئی آر شکیل نے بھیجی کہ اس پر آپ اپنا رد عمل دیں تو انسان سوچتا ہے کہ لوگ کیا کہیں گے، ایف آئی آر کیا ہے اور یہ مطالبہ کیا کر رہے ہیں. بہرحال جب بات کی، ملتان کے دوستوں نے بہت سٹرگل کی اور جس چیف رپورٹر کو گرفتار کیا گیا تھا اس کو بے گناہ قرار دے کر نکالا گیا اور پتہ چلا کہ یہ ایف آئی آر صرف ان کو بدنام کرنے کے لیے اور ان کو خاموش کرانے کے لیے درج کی گئی تھی. ابھی کل کا واقعہ ہے، 3 دن پہلے گجرانوالہ کے ایک جرنلسٹ کے خلاف کمار بازی کا جھوٹا مقدمہ درج کر لیا گیا ہے. اسے پہلے اٹھایا گیا، رات بھر تھانہ احمدہ نگر میں بند رکھا گیا، تشدد کیا گیا. جب جرنلسٹوں کو پتہ چلا، انہوں نے سوشل میڈیا پہ کیمپین شروع کی تو اس کے خلاف صبح سویرے کمار بازی کا مقدمہ درج کر لیا گیا تاکہ اس کے متعلق کوئی بات نہ کر سکے. یا آج کل اس طرح کے ویپن بڑے عام استعمال ہو رہے ہیں. دوسرا وہ بھی پرانا حربہ ہے کہ جو جرنلسٹ بولتا ہے، جو چینل بات کرتا ہے، اس پر ملک دشمنی کے الزامات لگا دے تاکہ سوسائٹی کا اور عوامی رد عمل کے خلاف اتنا ہو کہ اس پریشر کے سامنے وہ اس کے ساتھ نہ کھڑا ہو سکے، تنظیمیں اس کے ساتھ کھڑی نہ ہو سکے، سول سوسائٹی اس کے ساتھ کھڑی نہ ہو سکے. یہ عام ویپن ہے جس کا جیو نیوز کو بہت عرصہ سامنے رہا. حامد میر صاحب آپ کے سامنے بیٹھے ہیں کہ ان پر اور دیگر وہ جرنلسٹ جو بات کرتے تھے، سب سے آسان ہوتا تھا یہ ملک دشمن ہے، یہ ملک کا غدار ہے، اور یہ الزامات وہ لوگ فیس کرتے رہے. اور آج پھر 2 ماہ پہلے اے آر وائی کے اسلام آباد کے بیورو چیف خاور گھمن، ڈائریکٹر نیوز اماد یوسف، ان کے مالک سلمان اقبال اور ایک خاتون جو اینکر تھی، ان کے خلاف بھی بغاوت کا مقدمہ درج کیا گیا اور آج تک وہ بیل پر ہیں اور اس کو بھوت رہے ہیں. اس طرح کے مقدمات کا اور الزامات کا بھی مسئلہ یہ ہوتا ہے کہ ایک عام آدمی جو پاکستان کے ساتھ محبت کرتا ہے، پاکستان کا وہ شہری جو پاکستان کے خلاف بات سننا پسند نہیں کرتا، جب اس کو پتہ چلے گا کہ کسی جرنلسٹ نے پاکستان کی دشمنی کی سازش کر لی ہے تو اس کے خلاف سوسائٹی میں نفرت ہوگی اور ان کو اس کے خلاف کارروائی میں آسانی ملے گی. اور اس کے علاوہ توہین مذہب عام سا معاملہ ہے کہ اگر آپ کسی کو توہین مذہب کا بلاسفیمی کا الزام لگا دیں تو ہمارے بہت سے بے گناہ غیر مسلم بھی اور مسلم بھی مارے گئے صرف اس الزام کی وجہ سے. اور آج کل نہیں، پہلے آپ جانتے ہوں گے کہ جب جیو کو بند کیا گیا تھا تو اس کی ایک خاتون اینکر کے خلاف اسی طرح کا کیس بنایا گیا، اور 2 ماہ پہلے اسلام آباد راولپنڈی اسلام آباد یونین آف جرنلسٹ کے سابق صدر جیو نیوز کے رپورٹر ہیں وقار ستی، ان کے خلاف بھی بلاسفیمی کا مقدمہ راولپنڈی میں درج کیا گیا. پوری سوسائٹی خاموش تھی. شکر گزار ہوں احمد میر صاحب کا کہ سب سے پہلے انہوں نے ٹویٹ کیا اور پھر ظاہر ان کے خلاف الزامات بھی لگے. پھر اس کے خلاف پی ایف یو جے نے سٹرگل کی، جدوجہد کی، لوئر کورٹ میں گئے، پھر ہائی کورٹ میں گئے. میں شکر گزار ہوں ہائی کورٹ کا کہ انہوں نے وہ مقدمہ خارج کرنے کا بھی حکم دے دیا ہے. اس کے علاوہ جو چیز سب سے خطرناک ہے وہ آرگنائز ٹرولنگ ہے، اور جس کا سیدھا سب سے پہلا سامنا ہماری خواتین اینکرز اور جرنلسٹوں کو کرنا پڑتا ہے. کہ جب کوئی جرنلسٹ بات کرتا ہے، خواہ وہ فیمیل جرنلسٹ ہو یا جرنلسٹ ہو، اس کے خلاف آپ آرگنائز ٹرولنگ شروع کر دیں، آپ کے اس کے والدہ سمجھائے گی، اس کے بھائی سمجھائیں گے، رشتہ دار سمجھائیں گے کہ بھائی پورا سوشل میڈیا جو ہے وہ آپ پر الزامات لگا رہا ہے، آپ کو کیا ضرورت ہے یہ بات کرنے کی. اور سب سے بڑا ہتھیار جو استعمال ہوتا ہے وہ معاشی قتل کا ہوتا ہے. آپ جانتے ہیں کہ ماضی میں بھی ہمارے بہت سے جرنلسٹوں کو بے روزگار کیا گیا، ان کے پروگرام بند کیے گئے. حامد میر صاحب تھے، طلعت حسین تھے، متی اللہ جان تھے، نصرت جاوید صاحب تھے، افتخار احمد صاحب لاہور سے ہیں، امتیاز عالم عامر میر صاحب لاہور سے ہیں، اور انبر شمسی وغیرہ. اور یہ سلسلہ آج بھی جاری ہے. میری صرف آپ سے جو ہمیں اس وقت بگیسٹ تھریٹ ہے وہ آرگنائز ٹرولنگ کا ہے. میری آسما جہانگیر کانفرنس میں شرکت کرنے والے آرگنائزر سے یہ التماس ہوگی کہ آج کی اس کانفرنس میں آرگنائز ٹرولنگ کو سینسرشپ کے خلاف سب سے بڑا ہتھیار قرار دیا جائے تاکہ اس کا مقابلہ کیا جا سکے. تھینک یو سو مچ.
A big thank you to all the speakers for their comments. I'm sorry because we have been running over time. There's no time left for the question answer session. In case anybody does have any questions, perhaps they can talk to or approach the speakers individually and have a word with them. But we really can't afford to take any time out. My apologies for that, and thank you all of you who took out the time to speak here today.